Hey, welcome to another episode of Studio 118. I'm Reuben. This is Bunjee.
Howdy.
How's it going? We are here live in studio in Calvary South Austin, Austin, Texas. We've got our studio audience here. Excited about that. And again, we're back with another episode. This one's a big one. It's going to be intense. We're going to delve deep into the topic of abortion. But before that, we want to give you an election update. This is day 3 of election day. And
we were counting votes, yes, but then they gave us the day off.
Yes.
So I guess we're going to start back up tomorrow.
Yeah. I twisted my back. I don't know what happened. There's a pipe burst in here somewhere. We got to take care of that. Anyways, guys, latest on that is it's all a dumpster fire, truly. So don't worry about that. We're here to have a good discussion on the important, controversial topic of abortion. Before we get into that, got to get some admin stuff out of the way. First of all, we're broadcasting live on YouTube, and I want to let you know you can, if you're streaming there, you can jump on the live chat, engage there. As I mentioned, we are going to have a Q&A portion after our discussion. So if you have any questions, and again, with this topic of abortion, no matter what side, what position you take, we want to hear your questions. We want to be able to battle these ideas out and share evidence and just critically think together. And again, if I didn't mention, Studio 118 is built on that. Isaiah 118, come, let us reason. That's what God is telling us to do, and that's what we want to do with these tough topics and help you, the audience, to delve deep into these topics so that you can have good conversations with the people around you and think critically for yourself, that we can strengthen your faith and possibly change your mind on some issues. So we're going to talk biblically, we're going to talk theologically and philosophically, and of course scientifically, and we're going to get into this topic. But yeah, we have a live chat for a Q&A session, so go ahead and engage there, say hi, or of course drop your question, we'll queue it up. If you want to call in your question, you can do that as well. We have a number, it's 512-576-5433. That's 512-576-5433. And another option you have is you can email your question to outreach@calvarysouthaustin.com. Again, that's outreach@calvarysouthaustin.com. Lastly, I do want to let you know that here at our church, Calvary South Austin, we have our doors open. We've been doing this for a number of months, and during this time, of course, we've taken all the necessary safety measures to make sure everybody's fellowshipping face-to-face, but doing it in a safe manner so that we can get through this time safely. So if you have any questions about that, call our church. I already gave the number, but we have services, in-person services on Sunday mornings at 9:15 a.m., and 11:15 a.m. And then also on Wednesday evenings, we meet again, and that's at 7 p.m. Of course, we do have live streams available for those that are still high risk, or if you are choosing to still shelter in place at home. We have live streams available for those both of those services. And even here in person at the church, we do have a room available. If you are high risk and you prefer to be separate from the rest of the congregation, we do have that available. Again, we're taking all necessary safety measures, but we want God's people to join together and do face-to-face fellowship and do it in a safe manner. So those are your options, guys. So all that admin stuff out of the way, as I mentioned, we got a big topic for you guys. We're going to jump right into it, and this is a big one, Bunjee. It's on abortion, and this has been in the works for at least the last month, and obviously we have the election still going on, and we had also a recent Supreme Court nominee hearing with Amy Coney Barrett, and it seemed to kind of revolve around the topic of abortion and women's rights and reproductive rights and all that. I guess there was a fear there that Trump's nominee of Amy Coney Barrett, given her Catholic upbringing and her Catholic faith, and then maybe past writings and whatnot, there was this fear that if she becomes a justice, which she did, and that Roe v. Wade is on the docket and it's going to be abolished, and women's rights are at risk. So with all that, and then with the election, of course, some consider it a referendum on women's rights and whatnot. And so we decided, hey, well, let's talk about abortion, even though it's going to be a little bit after the election, but we were wrong. It's during the election.
This is happening during the election.
In some states.
You can still get a vote in there, can't you? Can't you still get a vote in?
Hopefully YouTube does not flag our video.
False. These guys were fact checked.
Yes.
So we're not saying you can still vote.
Yes, of course not. Of course not.
Officially.
Yes. All right, a little bit of election humor there.
And you know, it's important for people to understand because, you know, the levels of fear associated with, you know, ACB, if we can call her that, the level of fear is, you know, kind of rooted in this idea that, well, if the Supreme Court becomes too conservative, then they can just make a federal decision to make abortion illegal in every state. And that's just not correct thinking. That's not the way it would play out. The way it would play out is that if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, then it goes back to state-based legislation, right? So the fear that, well, if we get too many conservatives on the Supreme Court, that all of a sudden all women's rights are gone and you know, say goodbye forever, right? It's really it's a little bit more, you know. It's a complete stretch on reality.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit later. Yeah. We'll have a section dedicated to what is Roe v. Wade, what came out of that,
right,
and just delve deep into that. But yes, you're right. Is that it seems that there's an unfounded fear that people are using this exaggerated line of women's rights are on the ballot and Roe v. Wade is in danger of being abolished and no more abortions and that kind of stuff. So
it's a huge issue because according to a poll conducted by PBS and NPR, so the best of both worlds there, you have 77% of the people that were polled believe that the Supreme Court should uphold the landmark decision Roe v. Wade, which has established a woman's right to abortion in some form. So very high percentage, according to this poll, a very high percentage of Americans want to maintain Roe v. Wade in the decisions that follow, right? So that's why it's such a huge issue. That's why so many are so passionate about this topic. So there's a lot to discuss there, and we will get into that. I did want to mention also that not only with Amy Coney Barrett's nomination and ultimate approval, become a justice, there's been several events that have no doubt just captured the attention of Americans all over, right? So I'm recalling, even within the last couple of years, but there was a bill that was passed in Georgia, the heartbeat bill, which basically was trying to impose a restriction on abortions, that the moment that a heartbeat is detected is when we should disallow abortions after that point. And there was, arguments made, of course, on both sides, but this Georgia at least was trying to impose a restriction on when you can detect a heartbeat. And I remember this was a big deal because you had businesses like, I think it was like Netflix, right? And certain movie production companies that were threatening, we're going to take our businesses. We film a lot in Georgia, which I guess is a beautiful place. Yeah, it is.
And so they were threatening, we're going to take our business, our production outside. And it passed, and they didn't do it. So they didn't follow through with that. But I remember that being a big issue. Also recently in, Biden, he, during his campaign speeches, was vowing to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land.
Right.
And this is what you were talking about, we're making promises that we can't keep here at this point. But he was...
Wait, so... There's a politician that made a promise that they can't keep? What?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it happens. It's rare, but, it happens.
So was that after he promised to,
engage in true pressure? Yes.
I guess what he's attempting to do there is make Roe v. Wade a what is it called? A super precedent or a... I'm forgetting the proper terminology.
I think it was super precedent. Basically, to make it an issue that is no longer
up for debate.
Up for debate.
Yeah.
Right.
Which Roe v. Wade is still up for debate,
yes.
because while there are a lot of people who want to maintain the decision of Roe v. Wade. There are many people who continue to challenge it, much like the law that you just mentioned from Georgia. It's like there's a reason why people continue to fight against Roe v. Wade. Even Jane Roe, Norma McCorvey, went back to the Supreme Court back in 2004 and into 2005 to attempt to overturn the case that was presented with her pseudonym, and they denied it. Right. So even Jane Roe herself wanted it overturned towards in the final years of her life. But nope. Wouldn't hear it.
Yep. A couple other things that I want to mention. So some of the audience may recognize some of these things, these events that happened. So New York, I think this was within the past year, but remember when they held a ceremony and they lit up buildings with pink lights, when they passed an abortion law, basically allowing abortion through all three terms of pregnancy. Right. So up until literally the day you're in labor, before you've given birth and you choose to abort your child, you can for whatever reason. And this passed in New York, and I remember them having a big celebratory conference, and people were clapping. They lit up buildings with pink in celebration of that. So that was very eye-opening for sure. Yeah. And even you guys might remember this guy, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. He, in a speech, was advocating for infanticide. That's the correct terminology for it. It's not even abortion, but after a baby has been born, he said something like this, and this is probably a paraphrase, but it's very close to what he said, that we would lay the newborn baby down on the table and make sure it's taken care of, and then the mother and the doctor would proceed to have a conversation about what her needs are. So even after the baby has been born, a conversation would take place as to whether we should continue giving care to this baby that has been born already. And so that sparked, I remember, calls for legislation to have a abortion survivor or born alive care acts, these types of legislative processes. So Ralph Northam, that was just recent, that he was advocating for infanticide. Try to walk that back, but there's no way around it. Those were his words. Internationally, this will probably be my last example, but internationally, you may or may not have heard about this story, but in Iceland, they were touting, they were essentially proud of the fact that they had gotten rid of Down syndrome in their nation. And how did they do that? Well,
how did they do that?
They explained, well, we have eradicated all the unborn children. That basically there was an optional test that was given to mothers and that could determine whether the child had Down syndrome or not. And up to now, they basically celebrated the fact that they were able to eradicate up to 98% of all Down syndrome cases in their land, in Iceland. So by what they would call terminating the pregnancies, what we would call killing the unborn child, they were able to eradicate Down syndrome. Is this something to be celebrated? I don't think so. This is what we're going to have a discussion
How
on.
many other things could we eradicate?
But again, just maybe kind of a little bit of foreshadowing, but this kind of goes in line with the original implementation by the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. So there's a little bit of eugenics in there. So keep that in mind. So all these things that have just been bubbling up and they've just been happening over the course of years. And as Bunjee mentioned, there's arguments on both sides. This issue is not going away anytime soon. But it is important for everyone to really be caught up to speed, to have the right information, just to have any sort of information. I think there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of ignorance on both sides, and that's what we're here to tackle tonight. About what is abortion, how specifically should Christians approach this issue, and then how do we use this information to successfully go and have conversations, not just arguments, but real, genuine, friendly conversations, civil discourse, and to try to persuade other people that abortion winds up killing and murdering unborn children.
Being passionate about the topic is not proof.
Yes, correct.
You can be extremely passionate about your point of view and still have the wrong point of view. So we want to actually use reason, logic. We want to approach this scientifically as well as biblically to see, what is the most reasonable position to hold when it comes to this tough topic.
Yeah. So then this gets into, I guess, a counter argument that, even Christians I've heard use this, is that, look, Christians really shouldn't be getting into the political sphere.
Sure.
Roe v. Wade, that's a political issue. Planned Parenthood versus Casey. These are all political cases and political subjects that politicians really just tout and let them handle it. But you as a Christian, you should not be out there in that sphere giving your opinion. Just stick to teaching the Bible, learning the Bible. And if you have a private belief about abortion, that's fine. But you shouldn't be going out into the public arena and spreading those ideas. How should we address this?
Well, it kind of is born out of the argument that, there's a tall wall that separates church and state, right? This concept that, the church should be over here, the state should be over here, and never the two shall meet.
The twain.
Yes. So, a lot of times, this separation of church and state is treated as, like this is part of our law, this is part of our Constitution, this is part of who America is, when in reality, many of our founding fathers were pastors. I personally have a history book printed by the American government, printed by, America, and this world history book from the 19th century begins with the story of creation, follows the whole Old Testament story all the way up until the cross of Christ, and has a picture of Jesus, crucified in this. And this is a world history book, printed by our government. The Bible used to be taught, in schools. And so, to think that the founding fathers intended that there would be complete separation between the church and the state. In reality, the original letter written by Thomas Jefferson.
That's where this phrase comes from.
Right. It just comes from a letter.
It gets tossed around a lot.
Right. Yeah. It gets tossed around like it's somewhere hidden in the Constitution or somewhere in the Bill of Rights, or and when in reality it's really just a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the pastor of a Baptist church, back in that period of time, and the Baptist preacher was concerned that the state would impose religion upon the church. And Jefferson was basically saying, no, we're building a tall wall.
There exists a wall, yes.
It's a separation between church and state, So in other words, the state isn't going to come in and impose a belief system upon the church. That's all that was intended by that.
So he was trying to relieve them of their worry that the state is not going to come in and impose something on you.
Right.
Whereas when people bring up the phrase now, they're reversing it, and they're saying, we don't want your ideas to be imposed upon us.
So then they try to make the argument that, so separation of church and state, you don't get to bring your beliefs into the government arena here. You have to put all of your religious beliefs to the side, right? Well, okay, so how do we determine what's moral then? I mean, so is morality just based on conventional wisdom? Because most laws boil down to some moral platitude, some more moral, hey, it's wrong to murder, it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to loot and riot, and these sorts of things, right? And there's a moral component to, most laws, and some might even argue all laws boil down to some sort of morality, right? Well, whose morality?
Yep.
What is the standard and what is the basis for making these moral claims and then having a law that protects it, right? So if you say, well, it's wrong to murder, a fully grown adult, well, why?
Yep.
Based on what? Well, it's wrong to do something that would harm somebody else.
Yep.
Says who?
Exactly.
I mean, I understand that most people would agree with that, but again, just agreeing with something doesn't make it true, right?
So I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Yeah,
so I know that person, that person would say, well, there's a social contract that we have. In order to be able to live my life, I need to be able to live in a contract within society.
Sure.
And that's where that comes from.
Right.
How do we...
Which is straight up utilitarianism.
Yes.
Right? And it's based on the idea that, hey, let's all just try to get along here, right? And let's all work together for the most amount of good for the most amount of people, right? Yeah. Well, that is one moral standard, but not one that I have to agree with or abide by. Yeah. Right? Let's go back to the days of slavery. There was a contract then too. And, the majority for a time here in America believed that it was okay to own slaves. Did that make it moral? No. We can look back and say they were wrong. There was a time when Hitler decided that, and the society in which he lived agreed that it's okay to gas Jews. Right? So there was a contract, there was an agreement, there was a utilitarian idea that this is the best thing for our society is to get rid of these subhumans. Did that make it moral or right? Of course not. They were wrong.
Under utilitarianism, though, they would have to concede for that time period, it was right.
It was right on. If utilitarianism is the standard, then you have to look back and say, well, slavery was important at that period of time, because it was just important for the utility of America, right? But nobody says that. Nobody looks back and says, well, utilitarianism, and everybody agreed upon this, and nobody does that, right? So to impose that here in this day and age is to just dismiss history and the atrocities of slavery and the atrocities of the Holocaust and say that, we can just, overlook all of that stuff, but then employ utilitarianism today and arrive at some sort of moral law that works, for the rest of time and eternity. No, we need a moral standard, a moral law that is beyond human, construct, or human invention. It has to be. We need a moral law that is transcendent, right? And so then the question is, well, where do we find such a transcendent moral law? So when we look at the laws of the land, when we look at the judicial system here in America, and we see that stealing is wrong, lying is wrong, false representation is wrong, adding votes in after the fact is wrong. These things are wrong. We recognize that these are not good behaviors. Why? Well, because there's a moral law written on our hearts, which the secular humanist would say evolved. But so if it's evolved and we're just part of this society and we've all evolved to have the same morality, well, what do you say to the person who comes along and says, yeah, but I don't subscribe to this morality. So I do murder, murder people. I do steal. I do take whatever I want. I do embrace the Darwinian concept that the strong will survive. I'm stronger than you. I like your car, and so I'm going to kill you and take your car. What's wrong with that? If Darwinian evolution is true, and morality is just something that's cooked up in my chemicals, firing off in my brain hole, cavity, if that's all it is, then who's to say, right? So, so then if that's the case, you no longer have an argument for saying that a religious person shouldn't bring religion into politics. You no longer have a leg to stand on. Because all you can say is, I think that you shouldn't bring your religion into politics. That's what I personally believe. Okay, you can believe that. But that's your belief. And so now you're trying to force your beliefs onto me.
Yes.
So the person who says that you shouldn't bring your religion into politics is attempting to bring their religion into politics by denying my right to bring my religion into politics. Where I'm saying, bring your religion, let's hash it out, let's see what ideas stand up to reason and logic, and
that's what I see it comes down to. So number one, just kind of recap what you've been talking about is once we kind of tear down this misunderstanding of the separation between church and state, which is the total reversal of what was actually intended. When that goes away, now it becomes a battle of worldviews. Right? Christians, we have our biblical worldview. Our authority is from the Bible and the moral law written on our hearts. But what's interesting is that the person that is arguing against us also has a moral law written on their hearts. And that's what we're saying. You have a worldview that you're trying to justify, and I have a worldview I'm trying to justify. Let's hash it out.
That's what politics is all about.
Exactly. It's not just because you label it a religious belief doesn't somehow devalue it. I know the intention is to try to devalue it, but that doesn't work. These are ideas that we got to hash out and think critically about. And let's look at the evidence. Let's consider philosophy. Let's consider biblical evidence. Let's consider scientific evidence, and let's see who is correct in the end.
Here's two religious beliefs that I hold to be true. Number one, that it's wrong to murder. And number two, that it's wrong to murder babies who are still in the womb, right? Those are both religious beliefs of mine.
Yep.
The reason why I believe these things are true is because there's a God in heaven who created me to have this moral law written on my heart. So if you're going to dismiss one, are you going to also dismiss the other?
Yeah.
No, but nobody argues. Well, hey, look, if you're going to make all these arguments against murdering people, I mean, that's what the Bible says. That's religious.
Let's get that religious argument out of here.
Nobody makes that argument. They only make it about unborn children.
And usually topics that they fundamentally disagree with, right?
Sure.
Right.
Of course.
It happens that way. And this is where, Christian, if you're watching here, if you want to take it back to the source, right, it comes down to how do you justify morality? As a person who does not, a skeptic, if you're talking to a skeptic or just a person who's a non-believer, this is, it goes to the crux of the issue. How do you justify your morality? And at that point, again, once you dismantle the separation of church and state, it comes down to how do you justify morality? We both have moral views, and you're just simply trying to dismiss me just by calling it a religious belief. That's not going to work. How do you justify morality? Where does it come from?
And the argument, you shouldn't force your beliefs on me, is a self-stultifying argument.
Self-refuting, yep.
Yep, it collapses in on itself because I believe it's okay for you to share your beliefs with me. And I believe that it's okay for me to share my beliefs with you. And I believe that I can defend those beliefs, and if there's just cause to actually create laws and legislate based on that moral belief. I believe the same thing is true for everybody else, right? So let's have a debate. Let's get into politics and let's see, what society says about it. But at the end of the day, I believe that we can both share our beliefs and hash it out and see what's most reasonable, right? But the person who says you shouldn't force your religious beliefs on me is actually doing what they're telling you not to do, because they're forcing their religious beliefs on you. They have a religious belief that it's wrong to force religious beliefs on other people.
Yep.
So if the person really believes it, if the person really believes that it's wrong to impose religious beliefs on others, then all they could say is nothing. They can just be quiet and not force their religious beliefs on those who are attempting to, share their religious beliefs with them.
Yep. Yeah, very, very good way to bring that up. I want to pause here. I understand that people from Cable Access Channel 11, if you're watching from Cable Access Channel 11, you've just joined. We've just started discussing the topic of abortion. This is Studio 118 here at Calvary South Austin in Austin, Texas. Welcome. If you have a question, we have a Q&A portion after our discussion here on abortion. If you have a question that you'd like to submit, no matter what position you take on this, we'd love to have a discussion with you. You can call in your question at 512-576-5433. Again, that's 512-576-5433. Somebody will be on the other line, and they will queue up your question. We'd love to have a discussion there after this one is done. All right, so going back, so we've essentially addressed the so-called separation of church and state, and we talked about the justification of morality and how people who don't want others to impose religious beliefs on them are self-refuting.
Yeah, I wanted to offer up one more. It's a quote that kind of supports what we've been talking about here, and it might help those who just tuned in on Cable Channel 11 to catch up with what we're talking about. I wanted to bring up the words of James Wilson. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He was also one of the original justices of the Supreme Court. And here's what he once said. Human law must rest its authority ultimately upon the authority of the law which is divine. Far from being rivals or enemies, religion and law are twin sisters, friends, and mutual assistants. Indeed, these two sciences run into each other. So to say that, you have to keep your religion away from law
Yeah.
Well, that kind of flies in the face of one of our first Supreme Court justices who believed wholeheartedly that religion and law are basically bedfellows, if you will. They're twin sisters. They're two sides of the same coin. So we can't separate religion and law.
Yeah.
They're intertwined.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, that would be a very good topic for a future discussion on, number one, just kind of the history of founding fathers and whatnot, but also how the relationship between theology and biblical studies and laws that are created, right?
Not to mention the three branches of government that AOC doesn't know about, but the concept of that being built upon or stemming from the concept of the triunity of God, and we can do a whole show on that.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
An entire show.
Yes.
All right.
4 hours.
Yes. All right. So before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty about Roe v. Wade and really the objections and whatever follows from that, we do want to kind of give a little bit of a couple of disclaimers. Number one, if you're joining us in this discussion about abortion, I do have to mention if we do open this discussion up to people of all ages. But if you're a parent, I do want to let you know, of course, we're going to be talking about a sensitive topic, of course. So there will be some subjects in here that we talk that are sensitive in nature. So if you have little ones that you are worried about hearing certain terminologies or certain concepts, at your discretion, user discretion, and there will be some images that might pop up on your screen later on in the show. So we want you to be aware of that. So just be aware if you have little ones that you care about. And then also do want to talk about, this is, of course, it can become an intense conversation. And Bunjee and I, we're going to argue vigorously for our position, for the pro-life position. There's no way around that. That's where we stand. So we can argue vigorously, but I don't want for you, the viewer and the audience, to be confused and think that our vigorous talking and explanations and support for our position, don't mistake that for condemning people on the other side. When we have arguments, when we have discussions about sensitive topics, we can definitely, get up here in terms of volume level and being very passionate about a certain subject. Yes, intense. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going and being judgmental towards other people and condemning the other side, people who take a different position. So I want to make that clear, because there may be people in the audience or people viewing this right now that have had an abortion, and they just might come in here with a little bit of a skeptical attitude towards what we're talking about. But I want to let you know, number one, we definitely care for you. We love you, and we love you because God loves you. God loves all of his creation, no matter what has taken place in their life. Whether you've had an abortion, whether you are a drug addict, whether there's a whole amount of sins and awful things that people do with their life, but God loves them all. And God offers forgiveness to all. And that's something that, of course, is clearly laid out in the Bible. Number one, I'm thinking of like 1 John 4:9, which claims that God is love. He is the source of love, but he is also love defined. And through the person of Jesus Christ, that was love incarnate. And so when we worship our God, when we talk about our God, we're talking about a God of love. But he's also a God who cherishes his creation and values the life that he's given to his creation. And so we have to balance those two, but we are not condemning the woman who has had an abortion, and we're not condemning the man also that has maybe pressured his significant other into having an abortion. I know you might want to offer some other stuff about that. But.
Yeah, and it's possible that somebody's watching who has actually worked in the industry. And maybe you've assisted, or maybe you've actually conducted abortions yourself. Not only would I agree with what Reuben has said, that if you're post-abortive, or you've paid for an abortion, or you've encouraged an abortion, whatever it is, I just want you to recognize that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. That's what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8. And I hold on to this verse every day because I'm guilty of all kinds of sin. You know, when you look at my past, when you look at my upbringing, when you look at, you know, the life that I led before I came to Christ, and even since I've come to Christ, I still struggle with sin. And yet I hold on to this truth that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. So I agree with Reuben. We're not here to condemn people who have sinned. We want to encourage you to trust in Jesus Christ, receive by faith that free gift of forgiveness that he offers every single person. He died on the cross so that sinners like us could be forgiven. And so trust in Jesus, and as you embrace the grace of God by faith in Jesus Christ, you can rest assured that there is now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus.
Yeah, and even God promises us that those who are in Christ Jesus, they become new creations. I believe that's in 2 Corinthians 5. But you become a new creation. He puts his Spirit in you. You are transformed from the inside out, and he gives you a new mind, a new heart. And yeah, he then works in you to perfect you, to mold you into the image of Jesus. And it's an amazing transformation that takes place. And what's more, other than, of course, the beautiful supernatural transformation that is offered, we want to also we're not here just to tear down arguments. This is not just about winning an argument and who has more evidence and whatnot, although that plays an important role. But as Christians, we do believe that we want to think critically, but we also want to offer care and support for those who are dealing with perhaps post-abortive stress. Perhaps you're in the midst of thinking of having an abortion. But we want to let you know there's also practical routes, practical care that we offer as Christians, as a church, as the body of Jesus Christ. I think we have a couple of slides that we could put up here that there are, here in Austin, Texas at least, there is a True Care Austin. And this is a pregnancy center, a support center that offers free pregnancy testing, and they offer referrals for medical services. So they want to take you in, they want to care for you, but they also want to give you all the information that you need as perhaps you're pregnant and you're just not sure what to do at that point. Maybe you're stressing out about it, financial issues, home issues, all that kind of stuff. They want to take you in, care for you, give you the information that you need, but then also they refer you perhaps to for adoption agencies. That might be a viable option instead of going through with an abortion. So there's a whole host of these types of businesses that offer support. Support centers, pregnancy crisis centers, businesses of that sort. They want to offer their love and support for the mother and even the father, because as we know, the father's involved too. For the family that is considering, man, we don't know. We had an unplanned pregnancy and we don't know what to do. Family may not support us, that kind of stuff. Reach out to one of these businesses and get the support that you need. And of course, here, at least at Calvary South Austin, we welcome you. We want to welcome you with loving arms, and we want to bring you in and direct you towards one of these centers, and we can help in ways that we're allowed to and that we can as we have availability. And as God blesses us, we want to bless those who are in need as well. So there's a whole host of options.
And knowing that, this is going out on the internet, and there's people beyond Austin, Texas out there, you might just contact the Calvary Chapel in your area and connect with the leaders at the Calvary Chapel in your area or closest to you, and they can probably direct you to a help center, a pregnancy center in your area that will actually walk with you through this period of your life, so that you can, give your baby life, and yet still take advantage of the opportunities that they have for adoption and other services that will help you.
Yeah. So that's our heart, guys. We're really, truly coming from a heart of concern and care and love. All of these that are, exist simultaneously, but we want you, the viewer, to understand that we're not here just to, have a silly discussion or just tear down arguments or anything like that. We truly do care about this. We're passionate about this topic. And it's because of that, because we care for the people on the other side of this camera, that we want to have a vigorous discussion, and we want to lay out the evidence, and we want to show that the pro-life position is the position that makes most sense, not only scientifically and philosophically, but most of all, biblically. God cares about his creation. There's inherent value, there's inherent worth for every creation, including the child in the womb. And so I hope that comes through, and we're going to carry on with our discussion, and hopefully you can see that. But of course, we welcome your questions. We welcome your comments. Again, we have that live chat going on YouTube, and you can email your comments and questions to outreach@calvarysouthAustin.com. And of course, if you're watching on Cable Access 11, call in your question at 512-576-5433. And if you have any questions in general about, hey, where can I get more information? You can also email info@calvarysouthAustin.com or call the church, and the person on the other line there can direct you to some resources. All right, so take advantage of that, please. All right, let's move on to now. Let's get into the nitty-gritty then. We want to talk about what's on everyone's mind, Roe v. Wade, right? We want to talk about what is Roe v. Wade, what does it say, what did it actually accomplish, what have been the results of that kind of stuff. So I guess, I'll throw in my 2 cents here. So Roe v. Wade was a landmark decision in the Supreme Court. So this was a case that went all the way to Supreme Court. And it centered around a litigant known as Jane Roe, which you already divulged was Norma McCorvey. And there was also a Texan doctor that was attached to that as well. But essentially, they were fighting for the right to have an abortion. As it stood at that time, abortion was illegal.
In Texas.
In Texas, right.
Right.
And this case, they were essentially fighting for why, if a mother is pregnant, why can she not have the right to do with her body as she pleases? And so it became what's known as a right to privacy issue.
Right.
What business does the government have in legislating what a woman can do with her body? And so this all went down in 1973, and it went all the way to Supreme Court, as I mentioned, and they actually wound up ruling, and wouldn't you know, there were 9 Supreme Court justices, all male, right? This is just another trope that gets thrown around. No uterus, no opinion. But it was actually 9 white male Supreme Court justices that ruled, 7-2. And they deemed that that the Constitution of the United States, it does protect a pregnant woman's liberty to choose to have an abortion without government restriction. So there was a right to privacy that was basically given over to the woman choosing to have an abortion. And what essentially this accomplished, what I see, is that it basically gave now at a federal level, right, this broad-based access to abortion, no restrictions. If you are pregnant and if you want to terminate your pregnancy, or what we would call kill the unborn child, you have now a fundamental right to do so. Okay, so that, and what we see with the data as of then, abortion skyrocketed. And we'll talk about it a little bit later. But that was my understanding of what happened, this Supreme Court decision. Now, I do want to add also that within the summary, the summary that the justices give after these decisions are made, you can see that this decision really revolved, in a sense, around what is the unborn? Is it human? Is it a person? And they they explicitly admitted that if this question is answered, it can demolish the whole basis for this case. And I want to read a little bit of that summary if I can. So, number one, they mentioned that the district court held that the appellee failed to meet the burden of demonstrating that the Texas statute's infringement upon Roe's rights, I'm reading quotes from the summary, was necessary to support a compelling state interest. So they didn't do a good job of basically saying that the government should be able to infringe upon a woman's rights. They also wrote that the appellee argues that the state's determination to recognize and protect prenatal life from and after conception constitutes a compelling state interest. That's what the state was trying to present their case. They're saying that essentially the prenatal life, the unborn child in the womb, is a person. That was a big bulk of their case. They go on to mention that the appellee and certain amici argue that the fetus is a person within the language and meaning of the 14th Amendment. In support of this, they outline at length and in detail the well-known facts of fetal development. This was part of the case. If this suggestion of personhood is established, the appellant's case, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed specifically by the 14th Amendment. The appellant conceded as much on re-argument. Both sides agreed. If personhood of the fetus, of the unborn child in the womb, is established, then this right to privacy then collapses. Why? Because now you have an additional person whose rights must be secured by the Constitution, by the 14th Amendment. But then they go on to mention that according to the Supreme Court justices that ruled in favor of Roe v. Wade, the Constitution does not define person in so many words. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment contains 3 references to person. And apparently, according to these justices, none of these references to person within the constitutional wording really were satisfactory to support the idea that person can be applied to the prenatal child, the unborn child in the womb. But in nearly all these instances, the use of the word is such that it has application only postnatally. None indicates with any assurance that it has any possible prenatal application. That, to me, was really the crux of how Roe v. Wade hung in the balance. It could have gone either way. But what's interesting to me is that the Supreme Court justices decided without having, basically, they decided to err on the side of ignorance. Not having all of the facts about what determines personhood, they decided to go and approve and legislate and give access to killing unborn children, even though they don't know what it is. Now, to me, that blows my mind. When you don't know if that is a person or not, and you're saying, but we give you the right to kill it. It could be a person, it could not be, I don't know, but we give you the right to terminate it. And if it's a person, we give you the right to kill it. I hope that strikes a chord with the viewer here. Now, I love this illustration that I learned a while back. Imagine there is a building that is set up for demolition. You know, they wired it up with all the TNT, and it's ready to go. All they need to do is, push down the lever as they do in Warner Brothers cartoons. And right as you're about to demolish this building, you're about to set off all the explosives, somebody comes in and runs up to you and says, oh, wait, there might be a person in there. We got to check. And you say, well, I can't be sure if there's, we did the sweep, we checked, and I didn't see any people, but I'm not really sure. If you say there's a person, I can't be sure now. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and demolish the building anyway. Does that make sense? No. A reasonable person, any reasonable person would say, we need to be 100% sure what this thing is, because if there is life in that building, then we'd be guilty of murder if we demolish this building with people inside of it. And that is what is going on. What my understanding is basically what was allowed with this ruling in Roe v. Wade. They didn't know if it was a person, but they decided to legislate it anyway. They allowed it to happen. And we're going to talk a little bit about, well, is it a person? Is it a human? And I think it's clear cut that what is inside the womb is a human, is a person. But that is my understanding of Roe v. Wade and the decision that was made.
Yeah, it's a good summary there. One of the things that I would recap here is that, so the debate is, can a woman have a private conversation with her physician, about, whether to keep this, what is it? Yep. Right? So there's the issue. Now, if they were to come to court and say, can a wife have a conversation with her hitman about murdering her husband, we would say, well, no, that can't happen. You can't have that private conversation with your hitman, about whether to murder your husband or not, because we recognize that the husband is a person, right? But as long as we have the what is it question unanswered, is it a baby? Is it a person? Is it a fetus? Is it life? As long as we don't answer that question, then we're going to go ahead and allow the pregnant lady and the physician to discuss what to do about this joy or this problem.
Yes.
Right? So then the question is, when does a fetus actually become a person? That's really what they were wrestling with. They were asking the question. They were wanting to know, when does the fetus become a person? At what point during gestation does the child then deserve the legal right to life and all of the protections of our Constitution? According to many, the unborn child isn't actually a person until the mother decides to keep her baby. That is an argument that I've literally heard, that, well, until the mother decides that it's a person, it's not a person. It's just a clump.
If it's wanted, it is a person.
So if it's wanted, it's a person. If it's not wanted, it's not a person. This is all very interesting, especially since 2004, because up until 2004, there was no legal precedent for determining that a fetus is a person. But then in 2004, there was what was passed by President George Bush. He passed what's known as the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. And this explicitly defines a fetus as a child in uterus and a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. Now, along with that came, also the allowance for abortion, right? So in order to get it passed, I'm guessing, they had to allow this.
No compromise.
Yeah, exactly right. But since 2004, we have legal precedent now that unborn victims of this Unborn Victims of Violence Act, it kind of gets into the double homicide cases where, if a woman is, shot and a pregnant woman is shot and the baby dies, then it's a double homicide, right?
Yes.
Well, is it a double homicide? Well,
I think in New York, actually, that recent one.
If the mother was undecided about whether to keep the baby or not, is that a double homicide?
Yep.
According to the law, yes. Right? So when do we take this standard and apply it across the board?
Yeah.
We now have legal precedent to believe that the child in uterus is a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. Right? So if that's true,
yep,
and it's a legal definition here, well, then we ought to be overturning Roe v. Wade, according to, the summary of the Roe v. Wade decision.
Yep. Yeah, this really gets to bring up those, because there are people who will basically say whatever is legal is right. Right? You show me a law, and that's what's right.
They're legalists.
They're legalists, yes, by definition. But yeah, there are these contradictions that exist in the legal space. You have laws that are broad-based that contradict each other. But yet you still have abortion advocates that will celebrate abortion, of course,
right,
that we're able to have access to abortion. But I'm sure they also would celebrate the fact that we're keeping mothers and unborn wanted children safe. But legally speaking, these are contradictory to one another.
Well, it reminds me of the terminology that is readily used by pro-choice advocates when they declare that the woman has the right to choose, the woman has reproductive rights. Well, we're not talking about reproduction. We're not talking about reproductive rights. We're talking about the right to terminate life.
Yes.
So the terminology reproductive rights is deceptive.
Yes.
Because we're not talking about your right to reproduce. You had the right to reproduce when you got pregnant.
You've already.
The government didn't come in and stop you from engaging in the act of sex, and so therefore no one's stopping your right to reproduce. The question is, do you have the right to terminate the fetus? Mm-hmm. Do you have the right to abort that embryo?
Yeah.
And if it's life, if it's a Homo sapien, if it is a human child, then why do you think that you have now a reproductive right to not reproduce the child that's been conceived in your womb?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and this I want to really just let audience know, right? This issue of abortion, this is what it comes down to. I know we talked about earlier about how there's a sub level that you can have a conversation about how do you justify morality, and that's kind of a pre-conversation, if you will, that you can have about abortion. But when it comes to the actual topic of abortion, when you're having a conversation, it is, I think, beneficial to always go to the source of the fundamental question of what is it? What is in the womb? Is it life? Is it human? Is it a person or not? Every other talking point about how, and we're going to get into these objections later, about how, well, if Roe v. Wade is abolished, there's going to be access to more illegal abortions. Those are going to increase. Or you're taking away my rights. Those are tertiary topics to talk about. The main topic to focus on is what is in the womb. Yeah. Once you answer that question, it is going to be a whole lot easier to answer those other questions that follow. Because if what's in the womb is a human life, there are implications, there are consequences to that. I hope you understand. And if it's not a life, then I think we both agree, then it's really just it's similar to having a benign tumor that you need to remove, or a mole that you don't like on your face.
If somebody came to me and said, hey, I'm going in for an operation to get rid of this tumor, I'd be like, well, good for you. Go for it. You know, I wouldn't do a whole show about why people shouldn't go get tumors cut, out of their bodies. I wouldn't have no dog in that fight. As a matter of fact, I support it. I support all tumors being removed.
Yes. Not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. But so then why are we so passionate about this clump of cells not being removed?
And I will say, I've had conversations with friends that have called what's in the womb just a clump of cells.
Clump of cells.
Verbatim.
Yes.
It's just a clump of cells. And this was a friend who at the time was pregnant with her child, and she called her baby a clump of cells at that moment. And so I hope you understand what's being done here. There's a little bit of a sleight of hand trying to be passed. When you call something just a clump of cells, what you're really doing is you're really just removing all humanization. You're dehumanizing that object. It could be a baby, but what you're trying to do at that moment when you call it just a clump of cells is you're really removing all human aspects from it. And you're really saying this is non-human. So it's really just the same as a benign tumor, as something that's a growth that is not wanted. Or maybe you do want it, which is odd. You would want a growth. And I get there's arguments of, well, it could potentially be a human life that I could potentially give worth to, that I could potentially raise and love. But right now it's just a clump of cells. It's really just the growth within me. I hope it's starting to kind of resonate that does not jive. That just does not make good sense. And so that's the main question that we got to ask, and that we'll be answering tonight. What is it? Is it life or not?
And we've already answered it legally.
Yes.
So we've already answered this question according to American law since 2004. The child in uterus is a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. That is law here in America. So we've answered the question legally. Yes, that is a human being.
And I want to add one more point to that, because I thought this was very, very important, because even going further back, so remember, the justices are arguing that they approached this question, is it a person? They said, well, based on precedent and other court cases, they're really, and in the way the Constitution uses the word person, we really don't see that it applies prenatally, only postnatally. Well, this author, Michael Ferris, he's the president of Alliance Defending Freedom. He wrote this: in 1868, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, and that talks about the right to privacy and the Establishment Clause, the abortion was illegal in virtually every state, most by statute, several by court decision. Why? Because advances in medicine in the early part of the 1800s changed the scientific understanding of life. Previously, life was thought to begin at quickening, when the baby was large enough for the mother to feel it move. And before quickening, abortion was often permitted. But new science revealed that life actually begins at conception. Doctors, legislators, and judges moved to the overwhelming consensus that life should be protected from that point. When the 14th Amendment declared that no person should be denied life without due process of law, it was agreed that unborn children were included in the category of protected persons. The Constitution has been pro-life since 1868. So you understand the circumstances around that time when you understand that abortion is legal because we understand that that is a person that must be protected from conception, and then the 14th Amendment is ratified to protect persons. 2 and 2 make 4. The blocks fit. The unborn children must be protected constitutionally.
And not only does 2 and 2 equal 4, but 23 and 23 equals new DNA.
Nice. Good segue.
Thank you.
Perfect. Very good. All right. So we're building up the case. We've gone over Roe v. Wade, what it's about, what's essentially accomplished. And we are going to talk in a little bit about, now move on to what the Bible has to say about life and perhaps abortion. Before I do that, I do want to share a couple of statistics with you, just to kind of give you another lay of the land about how prevalent is abortion in America and globally. So let's share a little bit of statistics here. In the U.S., since 1980, abortions have actually been steadily decreasing. All right, so in the 1980s, they were actually upwards of 1.5 million per year, 1.5 million abortions per year. And since then, to about a few years ago, it steadily decreased about half of that. So around 892K, a little bit over half of that. Now, they credit this to multiple factors, one of them being, there's less pregnancies overall, less births overall. So, of course, you're going to have less pregnancies, so less chance for abortion, less abortions. But they also attribute it to greater restrictions happening in each state, particularly in the early 2000s. And so what we've seen in each state, due to Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which actually allowed now for states to start allowing restrictions based on viability of the fetus. Now what you see is legislation occurring in each state trying to push that viability back. So viability means, you can now have restrictions on abortion based on can the fetus survive outside of the womb. And whenever that timeline is met, that's when you can impose a restriction on abortion. And what you have is now states like what we saw with Georgia with the heartbeat bill. It's not more of a viability, but more about what is occurring during the stages of development. But in certain states now, we're pushing that viability all the way back to about 20 weeks, because due to advances in medical technology, we are able to devise incubators now that a 20-week-old fetus, we're talking about something that fits in the palm of your hand, is allowed now to survive outside of the womb due to whatever complications. Maybe it's a botched abortion, maybe it was medically necessary. But now a baby that is only 20 weeks old, halfway through the gestational period, is able to survive outside of the womb, and they're able to put it in an incubator and allow it to grow fully to term, and then give it over to the parents. What an amazing time to be alive. I think we should all be celebrating this achievement. But yet we still have, like in New York, they still are allowing abortion to be allowed through all stages of pregnancy. Even when we understand that you don't have to kill the child. You can give birth and allow it to survive and give it up for adoption, because it's able to survive from 20 weeks and on. But we have this going on. So,
and you know what's interesting about this to me, and I've been formulating this in my mind for a little while. I've decided to go ahead and just kind of put it out there. It's a bit of a half-baked idea, but I think I could put it out there and just see how it stands. So, there are women who insist that, they want to abort their baby because, they don't want to have to be put through 9 months of carrying the baby and allowing what they consider to be a little parasite, sucking all of their nutrients and whatnot. So they think, well, 9 months, that's too long to, put up with this child to bring it to full term and give it up for adoption after the fact, right? So I'd rather just not go through 9 months of this for the sake of the life of this baby of mine, right? Mm-hmm. And yet, how many of these same people just argued for 9 months of lockdowns in order to spare the life of somebody else? Right? We've been through 9 months of people yelling at people if you don't have a mask on, because you're killing grandma, and we're just trying to save lives. We're willing to lock down for another 9 months if it saves one life. And yet these same people are so quick to just go abort their baby because they don't want to be inconvenienced for 9 months. Mm-hmm. Just doesn't seem to. I don't get it.
And I think you also agree, right, that there is a level of mental suffering for some of these mothers, right?
Sure.
Right. So it's
going to be tough.
It's not that we're not just simply dismissing, of course, the mother that is going through this time.
Yep.
But the logic is there. That when we're willing to endure 9 months of hardship, and it has been hard for many families, for sure.
Very hard. Still hard.
Suicide rates going up, drug use going up, abuse in the household going up through these 9 months.
Yep.
All for the sake of, it's more of a utilitarian argument now, all for the sake of the greater good.
Yep.
But now, when the mother is pregnant for 9 months, whatever means she got pregnant, right? Or it could be rape, incest, or just regular. But they want to have their cake and eat it too, it seems, right? They want to be able to dismiss the child in the womb.
Yeah. And it does come back to the question of life. I think that the average woman that has an abortion doesn't think that they're going in to take the life of their child. Mm-hmm. Right? I couldn't imagine a woman ever going in to get an abortion thinking, I'm going to take the life of my child right now, right? So I'm not suggesting that any woman ever thought that. No, I think that, we have a system here in America that has duped many ladies into thinking that it's not life, it's not a person, and it's okay, it's just a clump of cells, and if you don't want to deal with it for 9 months, go ahead and have the abortion, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, we've already pointed out legally,
yep,
that it's considered a life. And scientifically, I'm here to tell you that, when 23 chromosomes from the man and the 23 chromosomes from the woman connect, that's the only switch that gets flipped in the process. Mm-hmm. There is no other switch. Once fertilization happens and DNA is formed, that DNA is a program that's going to run unless that program is terminated. So, scientifically speaking, once fertilization happens, once a child is conceived, at the beginning it doesn't look like a human, but once that DNA is created, that special, unique DNA, that DNA is information, and it's a program that's going to run. And the only way to stop that program is by snuffing the life of it.
Yeah. I guess maybe we can get to the scientific aspect of it before we.
I'm getting ahead of us. I know.
No. I think this is probably a better route to take. So, scientifically speaking, as you mentioned, you brought up the case. It seems to me that this is not an undeniable. It's an undeniable fact, scientifically speaking. When the sperm meets the egg, it is creating a distinct life.
Separate.
A separate
Yes.
life with its own genetic code.
Yep.
This is in embryology textbooks throughout. When you go to med school, this is what you're learning. It is a separate entity that is created at the moment that the sperm and the egg meet.
Yes. There's even a spark of life that occurs that has been shown.
I remember the spark of life.
Yes.
And what's more than that, the embryology textbooks go out of their way to say that this is a new human life. And this is something that I don't think is really appreciated for those that are on the pro-choice side of things, is that, when you call it just a clump of cells, I think you're really just doing a disservice. I think it's more of a, you're not giving the full picture. Okay, so then you still have to ask, well, what is it? A clump of what kind of cells? Because truly, I'm a clump of cells.
Yeah, you are.
Right? Yes. Some are bigger than others.
Yeah, I am.
Nice. We're all clumps of cells, but we still need necessary categories in order to distinguish between certain clumps of cells. If the unborn fetus in the womb is just a clump of cells, I guess you're implying it's not human. If it's not human, what is it?
What is it? Yeah.
And if you want to go down that road, I guarantee you are going against science at that point. Look up in an embryology textbook. It will tell you it is a human life. It belongs to the human species, the Homo sapien. I've never seen two humans reproduce and have any other kind of species. This does not happen.
So what about Jeremy?
It only happened
It's a horrible
once.
question. That's the worst.
I'm kidding. This does not happen. If it's not human, the onus is on you to tell us what it is.
Right.
Do you have a new classification for it? What is it called? But every embryology textbook will clearly say it is a beginning of a new human life. That's scientifically speaking.
Right.
This is just a broad understanding. It is with no doubt about it, undeniable.
And what's interesting is that the mother's body, the mother's immune system, would set out to eradicate and expel the embryo as a foreign substance, right? Mm-hmm. And it's for this reason that researchers have actually spent a great deal of time attempting to understand how an unborn baby is protected against the immune system of the mother. I recently talked about this on my Daily Word video. It was back in 2012 when a group of researchers discovered that the embryo implantation actually sets off a process that ultimately turns off a key pathway required for the immune system to attack foreign bodies. And so basically the mother's immune system ramps down during this time period. And as a result, immune cells are never recruited to the site of the implantation and therefore can't harm the developing fetus. And then researchers have also discovered that there's this thick modified mucous membrane that encases the fetus and the placenta during the pregnancy, which then further protects the unborn child from the immune system of the mother. Now, why, if the mother is saying, well, I should have the right to do with my body what I want, well, your body's recognizing another body in you. So do your rights overrule your baby's rights? Because if the law says that this is a human baby, and if there's no other switch that's going to get flipped besides conception, and if the baby is the DNA and the genetics begins to form all of these protective layers, this mucous membrane and the placenta, and all of this is forming, there within the womb in order to protect this baby. Well, protect the baby from what? From the mother, from the immune system of the mother. Clearly, this is a scientific basis for there not being one body here, but two bodies, two distinct bodies with two separate DNA, identifiers. It's completely two separate people here. Mm-hmm. So why does one believe that she has more rights than the other? And going back to the terminology of the pro-choice movement. Well, pro-choice. What are you choosing here? Like, what is it that you're choosing? Because the choice that you want to make here is to take this other body that is growing within you and terminate its life. I don't think that's a choice. Like, that's not a choice that anybody should ever make. if you really want to, have the right choice, well, choose to not get pregnant. And I know that's not always the case. I know there's cases of rape, and we're going to talk about that. I know there's cases of incest and these sorts of things. So sometimes it's beyond the woman's control, and we'll talk about those issues here in a little while as we talk about morality and how do we make the right choices in these specific circumstances? Health of the mother's life is in danger. We'll talk about that. But as far as just the concept of pro-choice, how about just choosing to not get pregnant? Like if you have that ability to make that choice, to whether if you're going to engage in the sexual act, then make the choice at that point, not after conception. Because once conception happens, that's the only switch that gets flipped. Yeah. There is no, we can talk about development, and we can talk about, the blood beginning to form, and we can talk about, the heart beginning to form, and the fingers, and there's transformation going on. There's growth happening, and towards the end, this child looks more like a human than at the very beginning. But just because it doesn't look like a human baby at the beginning doesn't mean that it's not at its core and genetically speaking a human being.
Right. Yeah, this is something that we hear stories, right, of course we're going to bring up Hitler and stuff like that, but whenever we have defined people out of being a human, out of the personhood category, bad things have always happened.
They did it with the slaves.
Yep.
They did it with the Jews. Yeah.
When you start calling members of the human race non-persons, only bad things have ever followed.
Always.
And this is what boggles my mind. And I'd love, if you're on the pro-choice side, I'd love to hear from you on this issue of terminology. Whenever I see interviews being done with pro-choice advocates and Planned Parenthood spokespersons, you see the very careful language that is used, terminating the pregnancy, the fetus, fetal matter. Never do they acknowledge that it is a human life. Number one, they never acknowledge that it's a life, a living organism, and they never acknowledge that it is a human. And I know for a fact that is on purpose. It is by design that they speak these ways because they understand. And again, if you're on the pro-choice side, please let us know. But I understand that words matter. Words have meaning. And once you start telling a mother that walks into a Planned Parenthood, there is a human inside of you. There is a life. Would you like to see it? That is going to have consequences. And maybe it's not the consequences that you want, but again, we're talking about pro-choice, we're talking about words here, you truly should leave the choice up to the mother rather than, and give her all the information that is necessary. There's scientific information that we just talked about. So if you truly are pro-choice, then if a mother chooses to keep the baby, that should be okay. But what we see with Planned Parenthood and businesses like this is that really it just becomes an abortion industry.
Right.
So, we're trying to settle what is the life, scientifically speaking. And again, I did want to read this quote because I know there might be people, well, what's your source? What's a quote from embryology? Let me know. What embryology textbook says this?
Right.
Keith L. Moore, The Developing Human, Clinically Oriented Embryology, 7th edition, 2003, page 16. Human life begins at fertilization, the process during which a male gamete, or sperm, unites with a female gamete, or oocyte, ovum, to form a single cell called a zygote. This highly specialized totipotent cell marked the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. A zygote is the beginning of a new human being. And I got a set of over 40 quotes here that all say the same thing.
The zygote has its own distinct DNA. It is an individual that, given the opportunity, given the choice, will become a full-grown human being, right? So to me, if it comes down to, every woman should have the right to choose. Well, what if your baby's a little girl? Does she have the right to choose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, where are we going to draw the line, right? These are valid questions to be asking. There's implications. Ideas have consequences. And if you want to trot out an idea, you have to take it to its logical conclusion.
And then there's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? So do you wish you were aborted? Because if not, then the golden rule would lead you to not abort your child.
Yep. Taking it a step further, again, we're still in the scientific concept of what is it? What is in the womb? So, of course, we always say, well, it's just a fetus. We've gone from, it's just a clump of cells. Well, it's just a fetus. To me, when I hear that, number one, I just want to ask, well, what do you mean by that? Is that supposed to deliver some sort of forceful impact on, when you say fetus,
yeah.
What does that mean? And really, when I ever press people on this, what they're essentially saying is just a clump of cells. They're trying to use the word fetus, the term fetus, to say, well, it's not an infant, it's not a toddler. Those things we care about because they're outside of the womb, but inside of the womb, it's just a fetus. Well, scientifically speaking, yes, it's called a fetus, medically speaking, but that's because it's just in the stage of development. Here's what science has to say. The first 2 weeks after conception are known as the germinal stage. Okay, so there's 3 stages. Germinal stage, and then the 3rd through the 8th week is known as the embryonic period. And then from that time, the 9th week until birth, that's what's known as the fetal period. And that's when it's known as fetus. So when you say it's just a fetus, well, if you're in the right time period, yes, it is technically a fetus, but as we've just mentioned, it's a fetus, but it's also a human life in the fetal period of development. It's just the stage of development that you're talking about. But that does not negate the fact that it is a unique individual human life. It's a distinct life. So we need to get our terms straight here. I mean, if you want to get super technical, right, what does fetus mean? It means little one, right? It comes from the Latin. It just means little one because they understood that's what's in the womb. It's a little person. So there's many ways you can approach this, but if you're going to say it's just a fetus, you better be prepared to tell me that just because it's in a certain stage of development that it somehow negates its humanity. I don't know if you want to go there. So
yeah,
I think science is just overwhelmingly on the side that what is in the womb is a life. It is a living organism. All of its cellular structure and its DNA structure are organized for the development, for the growth of that new life. It is unlike any other organism that you want to get rid of. Like if it's a virus, that cellular structure, its intention is to destroy. This structure within the fetus, within the human life, it is organized in such a way that it's only promoting its development. And as Bunjee was mentioning, it forms protective layers. And so science is overwhelmingly on the side that it is a unique human individual. So I truly believe that the 7 justices that voted on Roe v. Wade were grossly incorrect. They did not know what they were talking about. They should have known. They should have been asking, scientifically speaking, what is in the womb? And they would have had a clear-cut answer even at that point. It is a human individual.
So not only do we have legal precedent now since 2004, but with advancing science and an understanding of what's happening in the womb, I think that there's both legal and scientific precedent to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I think that is a valid road to go down. And as we've been seeing, so again, what's happened since Planned Parenthood, so Roe v. Wade just opened access to abortions. And then Planned Parenthood v. Casey came along and said, well, you can restrict based on viability. And that's where you've been seeing states saying, well, if we can't just outright overturn Roe v. Wade, right, we can instill restrictions. And we've been seeing a lot of good work being done there to really push that viability stage all the way back. But I truly believe if there's a really gung-ho set of lawyers out there that can really develop a good case, scientifically speaking, legally speaking, it is a viable route to take.
And we've got a Supreme Court that I hope will hear it and weigh in with all the new information that we have now.
Yeah, and again, it's not even just a matter of, that's what I appreciated about Amy Coney Barrett, is that obviously she's pro-life Catholic, but she also follows the letter of the law. She understands that that's her job. But what we're trying to say also is that even legally speaking, it should be the case that the unborn should be protected. There's good precedent to do that, philosophically and legally speaking.
That's right.
So hopefully that is a route that is taken sometime in the future.
Yep.
So hopefully we've established the case that what is in the womb is life. It is a human life. It is a living organism that is growing. It is not a virus. It is not something you can just expel and terminate and kill. It is a human life, separate from the mother's. But here I do want to pause before we move on to the next topic. Again, you're tuning in to Studio 118, either on YouTube live stream, welcome, or on Austin Cable Access Channel 11. We're broadcasting here from Calvary South Austin here in Austin, Texas. Thank you for tuning in. We're talking about abortion. And go on the live chat on YouTube. We'll be having a Q&A time after our discussion here. We'd love to hear your feedback, your questions, and we can have a lively discussion here in the Q&A portion. So get on the live chat, or you can email your questions to outreach@calvarysouthaustin.com, or you can call in your questions if you'd like, and they'll queue them up at 512-576-5433. All right. So once we've established that there is human life, now comes the topic of, okay, let's say the pro-choicer agrees it is a human life, but I believe I still have a right or a freedom to terminate that life. So here is where I would want to trot out this really good response. It's known as the SLED response.
Right.
And essentially what this response does is it basically says, okay, it is a life. What are the main differences between the life in the womb and the life outside of the womb? And do any of those reasons give us justification for killing it, for killing the life, terminating the life? And it's broken down into an acronym known as SLED, S-L-E-D. And some very smart philosophers and thinkers have come up with these 4 distinctions of what is different between the life in the womb and outside of the womb. And it boils down to this: S, size; L, level of development; E, environment; and D, degree of dependency. These are the 4 main distinctions between the life inside of the womb and outside of the womb. And maybe we can just briefly talk about, do any of these differences justify terminating that life inside of the womb? So that first one, size. Obviously, the life in the womb is much smaller than, say, a Bunjee, just a little bit.
It's fair.
Yeah. Does the size of something justify killing anything? So if something is this small, right, about an inch, just because of its size, does that mean that I can kill it? What if it's a little bigger? You can play this game basically and say, what if it's as big as a normal human being, just like an adult, a fully formed human being here? Does that degree of difference in size justify killing you? So imagine this, right? The illustration I usually hear is, what if there was a magic shrinking ray gun? And you're an adult, you're 6 feet tall, let's say, and I can shrink you down with this ray gun to be 1 foot tall. Just because you're smaller, do I now have more justification? You're smaller than me. Do I have now more justification to end your life? Obviously not. And so why then do we think that the size of whatever's in the womb, that we can terminate that life?
Right.
I think that one's just a gimme. I think that's just obvious. What about level of development? So as we mentioned, there's 3 stages of development within the womb, right? The germinal stage, the embryonic, and then the fetal period. And as Bunjee clearly mentioned, you were talking about how it may not look like a human, right? It may not look like it's part of the human species right now in its developmental period. But then once I start seeing a little bit more features of what we call a human, that's when I'll be a little bit more convinced.
But still, people aren't convinced by that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But even when they have 10 toes and 10 fingers, and
yeah. But here's where I hear people saying, "Well, it's not. It doesn't look like a human," or even before, right? Before it starts getting the fingers and the toes and whatnot, they say, "Well, I can just take the abortion pill and just, get rid of it." Does the level of development give you justification over a life? And again, here's where I just point out to outside of the womb. I have a almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I am more developed than they are. Does that, well, in some areas. Does that fact alone give me justification to end their life?
Or what about someone that hasn't they're born with underdeveloped limbs?
Yeah.
Right? And that's how they're going to be for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. Does that mean we get to, kill them because they're underdeveloped?
This is the route that Iceland took, right? When they eradicated Down syndrome, they said because that level of development, they're not going to lead a normal human life. The merciful thing to do, according to them, is to end the life, kill it.
My mom was friends with a lady who was a foster mother. It was a foster home, and there were several kids there with Down syndrome. And I grew up around them. My mom would visit often and take me and my brother and my sister over there, and we had a great time. They were wonderful friends of ours. Some of the kids had Down syndrome, some didn't. But we all loved going over there, and they loved having us. And they weren't the same as me. They weren't developed in the same way that I was. But I couldn't imagine just saying, yeah, you know what? You're not going to develop exactly the way the rest of us will, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of you.
Wow.
I couldn't imagine that.
Yep. And I don't know if you've seen, when they have hearings in front of committees and whatnot, and sometimes political committees, right?
Yep.
And they bring Down syndrome people to give their testimony. And he said, "Why? You're looking at the person in the face. Why do you want to get rid of me?" Some of these testimonies, it's powerful, man. They're facing the people they want to get rid of in their face, and they're saying, "I want to get rid of you."
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The yelling sled doesn't check out.
Yep. So level of development. Just quickly think of an illustration of something that can happen outside of the womb, and say, can we then apply it just because it's inside of the womb? And that actually is a good segue now to the third argument here in SLED, which is environment. Does the environment of the fetus give us justification for killing it? So simply because it is inside of the womb, just because it's geographically located inside of the womb, does it lose its value? Does it give us justification to end its life? So consider an illustration, right? The moment the mother's in labor, she's giving birth, and the baby is on its way out. But then by nature of giving birth, sometimes they go back in for a little bit and they got to come back out. At that moment, is humanity given and then taken away just because it's in the womb and coming out? And then once it comes out, humanity is somehow a character trait that is now imposed upon the individual? Does it work that way?
Scuba divers, watch out.
Yes. Does your geographical location give anybody justification? Some people will call that genocide, when people start terminating people based on geographical location. Why are we doing this now to justify killing living human beings, as we've established, inside of the womb? That 9 inches that separates the baby from coming out of the womb is the most important 9 inches, man, because there are people out there who say, just because it's in the fetus, and more importantly, some people say, just because I can't see it. Just because I can't see it I don't want to see it. So it's like no out of sight, out of mind kind of stuff. This doesn't check out.
No.
And then that leads us to the last argument here in the SLED response is degree of dependency.
Yep.
This, I think, is a really good one. Just because, of course, the fetus is dependent on the nutrients and the resources that the mother's body is providing it, but does that alone give us justification for terminating the life inside of the womb? Again, let's think of an illustration outside of the womb. The degree of dependency does not end when it comes outside of the womb. Some would argue it doesn't end for another 18 years after that. That child is going to be highly dependent upon its parents. Can we now start killing toddlers and teenager kids, just because they have a high level of dependency upon their parents? What about when you get older and you start getting frail, and now you depend on your children to take care of you in some cases? Now, sadly, we are starting to see cases of euthanasia in the elderly. That shouldn't be so.
Yeah.
We're not valuing human life.
Yes. And really, at the end of the day, once we go through these arguments, as we consider the SLED arguments here, what it really exposes here is that the pro-choice position is really based on unjustified discrimination. Mm-hmm. It discriminates based on the size. Yep. Right. It discriminates, based on the level of development. It discriminates based on the environment, and it discriminates based on the degree of dependency. Well, I'm not going to share my nutrients for the next 9 months. Yep. Right. This is just unjust discrimination, because at the end of the day, the experts have weighed in and arrived at the conclusion that we don't know if it's a life, mm-hmm. but we're going to go ahead and make a decision about this thing that we haven't yet identified. Yeah. Well, if that's the argument, then it's just unjustified discrimination. Until you can lock down, no, it's not a life, or yes, it is a life, well, then you're just making decisions based on these discriminating factors.
Yeah. And what's even more tragic is that you were talking about how, there's cases of incest and rape and whatnot, but the overwhelming majority of abortions that are done, in the United States at least, are elective in nature.
That's right.
They are not because of the health of the mother. They are not due to rape or incest. The overwhelming majority are elective in nature. And the discriminatory reasons that are given for those elective abortions are financial pressure. I don't have the financial means to take care of a kid, therefore I'm going to terminate its life. I wanted a girl, but I have a boy in my womb right now, or vice versa. Or I have twins and I can't handle twins right now. Let's terminate them both.
Yep.
Race. There's all these reasons, or no reason at all, as done in New York recently. These are highly discriminatory reasons that are being given for elective abortions. How are we okay with this?
Right.
In the super woke culture that we live in, you think that we would try to be protecting the most vulnerable among us, but yet we choose to reject their personhood, and then we send them off to the slaughterhouse for overwhelmingly reasons that we would not agree with if we agree that they're persons. It boggles my mind.
Yeah. I think Florida actually has some pretty good stats on this because before you can get an abortion, you have to give the reason for why. Which that's not true of every state, but I think that we can look at Florida and maybe extrapolate some numbers to the rest of our country, from Florida, and it'll be close at least. But according to the reasons why women get abortions in Florida, as of 2018 at least, 0.14% was because the woman was raped.
Yep.
0.14%. 0.27%, the woman's life was endangered by the pregnancy. And then 1% is that there was a serious fetal abnormality. 0.01% is the result of incestuous relationship, right? So all of that, all those categories that I just presented make up less than 2%. Less than 2%.
Yeah.
So if you really want to make the argument that, well, it's to protect the life of the mother, it's because of incest, it's because of rape, it's because of, some sort of deformity or abnormality. That's less than 2%
Yeah.
Of all abortions.
And I've seen it happen where people point to the 2% as a justification
Right.
then for the 98%.
That's typically the argument. Is that, well, because we want to make sure,
rape? Yeah.
because we want to make sure that this less than 2% of women should be able to have an abortion, well, then we have to make abortion available to everyone.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't even follow.
Right.
Especially as we consider the fact that, those who claim that, well, I need to have an abortion because the life of the mother is at risk.
Yeah.
Which, was 0.27% of abortions, right? The reality is that that's rarely ever a real issue. Just to prove my point, I just want to consider a few statements. One by Alan Guttmacher, who's the former president of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Here's what he said. Today it is possible for almost any patient to be brought through pregnancy alive unless she suffers from a fatal disease such as cancer or leukemia. And if so, abortion would be unlikely to prolong, much less save the life of the mother. So this former president from Planned Parenthood assures us that based on medical advances, we can reasonably protect both the mother and the baby.
Yeah.
And bring both through the pregnancy without harm. Also, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, he is on the American Bioethics Advisory Commission. Here's what he said. He said, there's no conceivable clinical situations today where abortion is necessary to save the life of the mother. In fact, if her health is threatened and an abortion is performed, the abortion increases risks the mother will incur regarding her health.
Yeah, so you brought Bernard Nathanson. So I saw that he used to be he was one of the co-founders of NARAL, the National Abortion Rights,
Right.
One of those associations. So he actually changed his mind, and now he's on the pro-life side.
That's right.
Because he actually sees the baby for what it is, right? And so it's tremendous how their viewer, if you're on the pro-choice side of things, I say this with all, due respect, but I believe that you have been fed misinformation, or there's been information that has been withheld. So again, we've gone through legal issues, we've gone through scientific evidence, and now we're just considering basic critical thinking. What follows? What follows from these ideas? Ideas have consequences. And what we're seeing here is that, generally speaking, when we hear pro-choice arguments, we're seeing that people are trying to use the 2%, trying to protect the 2%, but then trying to create an argument for the 100%. They're trying to make access to abortion broadly accessible, but based on a tiny fraction of cases. And so rather than tightening and really focusing in on supporting women that are going through these horrible and tragic issues in their life, rape and incest and truly horrendous cases, rather than focusing in on them, we're really just trying to, on the pro-choice side of things, trying to make abortion just accessible for privacy issues, for elective elements. Why are we doing this? Does not make good sense. This is not critical thinking. It is an agenda. And again, once you answer that question, what is it? Is it a life? That has a consequence. You are now promoting an agenda and an idea that has led to the slaughter of globally over 60 million babies. 60 million babies since abortion rights have been given broad access across the world. That's a tremendous number of lives that have been lost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a number that would make Hitler blush.
Yeah. So I think a good segue here would be, as I explicitly mention it, is, we're talking about, so how do people justify, right, abortion?
Yeah.
And this actually leads into, the history of abortion rights and what Planned Parenthood. This comes into Planned Parenthood, history of Planned Parenthood. So I think we talked about a little bit about this on our last episode, but anyways, we can revisit it here. So Planned Parenthood, right? On the surface, superficially speaking, when you hear Planned Parenthood, they are for promoting planned families. They want to give you information and access to resources so that you can plan out your family the way you want it. You want to have a kid whenever you're ready. We want to give you resources and support in order to do that. Sounds good on the surface. But when you look into the beginnings of Planned Parenthood, it is a very dark history.
Yeah.
And I'm very sure many people are aware of the beginnings of Planned Parenthood. It starts with Margaret Sanger, a woman in the early 20th century who actually very recently Planned Parenthood now has been forced to distance themselves, or basically just say, you know what, we are no longer associating ourselves with the Margaret Sanger name, even though she is the founder of Planned Parenthood, and this is why. She was a straight-up eugenicist and a racist. This is clear. And the reason we bring this up is because when you understand what her reasoning was for creating Planned Parenthood, and then you see that work is still being carried today, you can see that there is a dark agenda going on with abortion in general. So let's talk Margaret Sanger a little bit, and eugenics and racism, right? So this is one of her well-known quotes, and it was a racist quote for the woke culture out there, right? She said, she's speaking to a pastor, and she's really trying to...
a black pastor.
Yes, a black pastor, and trying to gather support within the religious community, even though she was very highly anti-religious. But she needed the support because she had a eugenics program that she wanted to institute in society. And here was her quote: "We do not want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any more of their more rebellious members." She's basically laying out the plan for you. We are trying to extinguish the Negro population because she considered the Negro population, African Americans, on the same level as people with deformities, as people that had just bad genetics, that were weaker, according to her, in society. She lumped the Negro population in there. She was all about abortion rights. She was all about right to privacy and having access to abortion. But because she didn't want large families, and she didn't want families that had any ill children, polio or whatever other disease. I'm sure Down syndrome would have been in there, but she lumped the Negro population in there.
Yep.
Straight up racist. She spoke at KKK rallies. She was invited by them. She was willing to get her word out and lock arms with even the KKK because she understood, again, KKK is trying to extinguish Negro population as well. So she's trying to get that understanding out there. Eugenics. She wanted the weak, according to her, in society to be done away with. She wanted a stronger race.
This is from her autobiography. She explains her goal in this way: the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization.
She's way with words.
And, this is the very reason why Reverend Jesse Jackson once railed against abortion, and he called it black genocide. And while I get it that the people who are running these Planned Parenthood, centers are feeling like they're providing, health and human services, for neighborhoods, they literally, put these Planned Parenthood centers in low-income neighborhoods
By design.
By design.
Even by design from Margaret Sanger.
By her, yes.
Yep.
All to get rid of what she called defective stocks, which I find disgusting.
Yeah.
Completely disgusting.
And so maybe some of the viewers out there, they say, you know what, but that's the past, that's history. We can reject Margaret Sanger, but still uplift abortion rights because we believe it is a fundamental right. Well, let's see. This experiment has been going on for about 100 years now, right? What has been the impact? Well, I'll show you. In New York, right? Again, they just finished celebrating the fact that they've opened abortion access through all the whole pregnancy. Did you know that the majority of abortions reported in New York City, in the black community, you are more likely to die from an abortion in New York City than you are to be born if you're black?
Yeah.
You are more likely to die from an abortion.
Yeah, more babies of color are aborted in New York City than are being born.
Yep.
And by the design of Margaret Sanger.
So if you want to go down the route of say, well, we can reject Margaret Sanger and her eugenicist policies, but still uphold Planned Parenthood because, as Bunjee mentioned, the idea is that we're providing reproductive services and help and what, there's mammograms, there's the popular mammograms that is a myth, but that's the way the argument goes. But what you've essentially allowed now is that in pockets of urban areas, and usually low-income areas, and usually in areas that have minorities in them. Again, in this woke culture, we're supposed to be uplifting minorities, but you are extinguishing them. You are getting rid of the majority of them. And this is not just the black community, but even Hispanics as well. Nearly 67% of the total abortions reported in New York City were committed on minority black and Hispanic women. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, no. 20 million babies of color have been killed in abortion clinics since Roe v. Wade. That's huge.
Yep.
It's heartbreaking.
And to take it even a step further, perhaps some of the viewership here is aware of some of those hidden camera videos that were done a few years ago by, I forget, David DeLayden, I believe, out in California. Where
about, Project Veritas?
I don't think he was associated with Project Veritas. This was his own thing. But yeah, he essentially started this fake corporation that was supposedly interested in selling or buying fetal remains from Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood obviously being a non-profit organization. Allegedly, yes. And here they were caught in broad daylight having open and honest conversations about how to make a profit off of selling fetal remains from abortions. And well, you say, well, I mean, they're already dead, so, what's the issue here? Well, when you go and listen to the conversations, and you have the directors and the doctors and the nurses all in there essentially changing the way they do customer service, if you can call it that. They're changing their policies now to try to get as many fetal remains intact. Abortion, and we'll share this in a little while, the process of an abortion is not a pretty one. And you have to basically change the way you do things medically in order to get as many intact fetal remains, because those were really the profit drivers for Planned Parenthood. And they were caught on tape admitting as much, that they were changing the way they did, that they related to the mothers that would come in. Essentially, for the most part, they would try to pressure them to have an abortion when they didn't really need one. They would try to push it onto the mother.
If you go to a car lot, you better believe they're going to try to sell you a car. And if you go to a Planned Parenthood, they want to present Planned Parenthood as a place where women get health and human services, when in reality, you walk in there, they're not going to try to talk you into adoption. They're not going to try to talk you into keeping your baby. They're not going to encourage you to exercise your reproductive right to reproduce. They're going to encourage you to exercise your reproductive right to terminate the life of your baby. That's what they're there to do. And the reason why is because they get to cash in twice. You're going to pay for the abortion, and then they're going to turn around and sell your baby parts and cash in twice.
Yeah.
It's wicked.
There's even been footage of them being, these are kind of sting operations, but people have gone in claiming to, there's a young girl that comes in with, supposedly a pimp or something and obviously the girl should be in danger, and they have an obligation, a legal obligation.
Is it Little Pimp?
Yes, something like that. They have a legal obligation to report that something nefarious is going on. But there's been more than several instances where they don't report it. They say, well, we'll work with you. We'll work with you. You need the abortion. You got to get it done, and we'll work with you. And they never wind up reporting what they should have reported. Now, I've also heard this argument saying, well, like what you're saying, well, if you go to an abortion industry, of course you're going to get sold the abortion. But, some pro-choice advocates would say, well, and this is Planned Parenthood actually put this out. They try to market this for a little bit. Abortion is only 3% of what we offer.
Right.
It only accounts for 3% of our services that we offer on an annual basis. So we're not an abortion industry. We're Planned Parenthood. We offer other resources like mammograms, but not. But did you know that 3% of services, the abortions that they offer and that they actually complete, accounts for 90% of their revenue? So at what point of revenue do you start considering yourself an abortion industry? I think 90% is a good number. So you can say, again, this is all the way issues are framed. I get it. They have an agenda, and they want to present this public persona. And so they say it only accounts for 3% of our services. But then you follow the money. It accounts for 90% of their revenue. This is not a family care business. This is an abortion industry.
And also, when you look at the line items and how they divide up their services, they're monkeying with their story.
Yeah.
So even the 3% argument doesn't really hold water when you actually look at how they line item each little thing.
Yeah.
So the 3%, position is really just a spin on what they're actually doing. If you're making 90% of your income, it would be like Nike saying, that we sell laces too, and we sell T-shirts too. But look, you're selling shoes, buddy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're selling shoes.
Right.
But
So this is a look into Planned Parenthood, right? Which is obviously probably one of, if not the most famous company or business that is pointed to in terms of keeping abortion access in public view and promoting that agenda. So understanding then, you cannot separate your founder, Margaret Sanger, from what services you offer, because you see the impact it has specifically on the minority community. And I would suspect in 2020, in the super woke culture that we live in, we would want to uplift the minority community. But even more than that, Planned Parenthoods now are basically becoming these car salesmen, as you put it. They're now pressuring. There's this pressure.
High pressure
situation to have an abortion. I think we were talking a little bit earlier about certain former employees of Planned Parenthood that basically saw it for what it was, what was happening there, and they got sick of it. And now they're on the pro-life side of things, right?
Yes.
Probably the most famous one that we know is Abby Johnson.
Right.
I think she came out of was it, I think she used to work at a Planned Parenthood there in College Station or Bryan. Could be mistaken. But point is, she actually saw and I think it's because she actually saw the abortion procedure.
Yes.
So she was all for it, but had never seen a procedure up until that point. And when she saw what actually went down, what actually occurred in an abortion procedure, that completely changed. She had a moment of crisis, basically, of, wow, I didn't know this is what I was supporting. And for a time there, she basically was wrestling with, can I continue supporting an industry that is destroying and tearing apart babies? And she wound up going the other way. And there's plenty of other stories of people that have worked for Planned Parenthood and have walked away because of that. And, speaking of what goes down in an abortion procedure, I think this is a good time to talk a little bit about that. I don't know if many people are familiar with what occurs, what abortion is. Some people, because we just use, again, there's euphemisms being thrown around. We terminate the pregnancy. We try to flower it up and talk more about how the woman will feel accomplished, and now she can continue on with the rest of her life. And it's more like, okay, you have an abortion, it's really just a blip in the road, and then you continue on. But let's talk about what abortion is. Let's talk about the actual procedure. Now, as mentioned, there's 3 different stages of development, right? The germinal stage, the embryonic period, and then the fetal period that we talked about. So you're dealing with different size, different levels of development there. So again, I do want to add just a disclaimer here that we're about to show some images here, and they may there might be a little graphic, or they will be graphic, but we believe it is important to show the reality of abortion and the procedure that occurs. So again, if you're a parent out there and you got little ones, we're going to might show some graphic images here, so you just use their discretion. Okay, so there's a couple of different procedures, okay, depending on what level of development the fetus is in the womb. Number one of them is known as dilation and evacuation. Dilation and evacuation is a procedure that essentially they dilate the cervix of the mother, and there's medicine involved, and they give time for the mother's cervix to widen. And what happens now, so there's a good graphic right there, is when the cervix is open enough, they stick these, I guess they're tongs, but they're really grippers. And they have these very hard grippers, because you're going to be needing to now wrap the grippers around the child, and you essentially have to, and the doctor's going in blind. He really can't see what he's doing, but I mean, with experience, you get really good at it. And there's videos of a doctor explaining. This is a still shot from that video. He's explaining exactly what goes on. But essentially, you're tearing the baby limb from limb. I believe this procedure occurs within the 2nd trimester. So this is a good number of months into the pregnancy, and you're tearing a baby limb from limb, because that is the only way that you can make sure that life is terminated before it comes out of the womb. Because as we know, once it comes out of the womb, you're legally obligated and medically obligated to care for that life. So you need to make sure that life is terminated inside the womb.
And there are survivors.
Yep.
There are abortion survivors.
And there you go. And to make sure that, because if you leave any sort of remaining appendages of that baby inside the womb, now afterwards the doctor has to have somebody put all the parts back together to make sure they have everything.
Right.
It's a sad state of affairs. And
it's also sad that it's been sold as safe and rare.
Yes.
When in reality, there are many times that it wasn't safe. There was damage. I had the privilege of interviewing many post-abortive women when we went to Washington with Norma McCorvey back in 2005. And we not only filmed her appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn the case in her pseudonym, but we also worked with a group of post-abortive women and filmed their testimonies. And there were several who talked about being basically shoved out the door, still bleeding, still hemorrhaging, not well, not safe.
Yeah.
And some having to go back and seek further medical attention after their abortion, and then the long-term effects, which we won't get into right now, but just the emotional scarring as well as the physical scarring that after what women have enough abortions, it can be hard to actually have a baby because of the scarring, because doctors are going blind. Yeah. And they're just grabbing what they can grab.
And they will scar the uterine lining, and it has prevented many women from having further pregnancies. Yeah.
The car salesman tells you it's safe.
Yeah.
But it's a Yugo.
Yes.
It's not good. It's not safe.
Yeah, and that's, again, we talk about the safety of the mother, right? But again, we're not talking about the safety of the kid.
Of course,
the child,
right? Yeah, that's not a concern because they don't believe it's alive.
Right, and again, I believe it's important to show these images, these graphic images, because we're trying to bring to light what many women, surprisingly, do not know about abortion. They think it's going to be just a simple procedure, an outpatient procedure, but they don't tell you about the unintended consequences that come along with it. It is not just a procedure that is done, like getting LASIK or something. You are having surgery, and it is you're basically tearing a life limb from limb.
Yeah.
Now, talk about third trimester abortions. This one's radical, where now, because the baby is bigger, you really can't forcefully tear it limb from limb, so they developed a different procedure for this. And for this one, they actually inject the infant, or not the infant, but the fetus, with a chemical either in the head or in the stomach, which essentially starts the death process. That chemical that they inject that baby with is for the intention of killing it. And then they will give the mother now some separate medicine to then force the uterus to expel the dead fetus. So essentially, you give birth to a stillborn. You give birth to a dead baby, and then they go ahead and discard it or wind up selling it to other industries.
I would encourage you to go check out Gianna Jensen, who survived this. She survived her abortion and has a powerful testimony now.
Mm. Yeah, because there is another procedure that I believe that they inject, and it actually tries to burn the baby.
That's right. They inject a solution.
Yeah.
That burns and basically.
Yes, and this woman actually survived.
And she survived it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, and there's plenty more stories like that. And so, what do we do with these cases? Well, what do you tell that woman who's given the testimony? An attempt was made on my life to be burned alive. Can you look her in the eye and say, "You're not valuable. You were never wanted. You're not valuable. Why are you talking?" Can you tell her that? I'd have a hard time doing that.
Right.
So this is the reality of abortion. It's been painted in media, in publications, as this wonderful, glorious procedure that you can have that will help you further yourself in your career or help you manage the size of your family. And sadly, again, it is impacting the minority community. It is scarring, traumatizing women, not to mention the fathers who now have to deal with the fact there are some fathers who pressure their significant others into having an abortion. There are fathers who had no idea that their significant other went to go and have an abortion and they wanted to have that child, Remember, what is in the womb has half the chromosomes of the father. This is just as much the father's as it is the mother's, but there is this push to make it, to spin the issue such that it is only the mother's decision. That's not right. Scientifically speaking, it is both the mother and the father that have a say. But many women, many mothers and fathers have been traumatized, have been scarred by abortion. And you have to deal with that fact. I have yet to talk to a pro-choice person who can even bring up this issue of the scarring of the women, of the traumatization that goes on with women and men after the fact.
Yeah. After interviewing several post-abortive women, one story that I heard told by many was them coming to grips with the fact that they would go into a deep depression on the anniversary of their abortion. Some of them having multiple abortions would be in a depressive state several times a year that just corresponded with the anniversary of their abortion. It wasn't something that they were thinking through. It wasn't something that they were considering, and it wasn't until after coming to Christ and coming to grips with why am I in this funk, and then realizing that their depression was directly connected to the emotional scars of their abortion. And it's possible that there are ladies watching right now who are coming to grips with that fact at this very moment, realizing that maybe you find yourself in a deep depression and it corresponds to the time of an abortion that you've had. The ladies that I interviewed were also rejoicing in finding the healing that Christ gives to those who trust in Him. And so if you're a lady who finds themselves in deep depression, and you realize now that corresponds with the abortion of your baby, I just encourage you to cry out to the Lord Jesus Christ and cry out to Him and trust in Him and receive the forgiveness that He offers, and allow Him to heal that part of you that was broken by the abortion that you were duped into having. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I think that's a good time to then switch over to, okay, what does God's Word have to say about this?
Yeah.
So as Christians, obviously, it's not that we don't simply take a pro-life position. Obviously, there's good scientific evidence, there's good legal precedent, philosophical precedent, and now we want to talk about a biblical precedent for the value, putting value, inherent value, on all life, unborn and born. And we take this position because it is clear in the Bible that God values all life, specifically unborn, and we can show this here. One verse that comes to mind is this is a popular verse, in the book of Psalms, Psalm 139, verses 13 through 15. The psalmist wrote, "For you, God, formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth." And here is what he's alluding to, the psalmist, is that God took great care into how the baby was formed inside of the womb. Again, we've talked about the scientific evidence about how the mother's body, the mother's system is designed to care for that body in the womb. And then that body in the womb, DNA, the structure of the DNA is setting this process in motion of carefully designing it. And this is God's work. God is the Father of all creation. And the psalmist is saying, you cared for me. I am wonderfully and fearfully made. God cares about that life in the womb, and He cares so much that He has this process that carefully is designing the baby inside of the womb, and He loves it.
Yeah, Job refers to us being made in the womb by the Lord. We also see, Jeremiah, the Lord telling Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. God has like an ability to know the end from the beginning. He's all knowing. And so, God not only knew that he would form us in the womb, he even has an understanding, some sort of knowledge of us, before we are actually conceived.
But the connection there also is that God is assigning personhood to the life in the womb.
Exactly right.
He's saying, Jeremiah, the you that I'm talking to now is the same you that is in the womb.
Yeah. And the same you that was in my heart and in my mind before I formed you.
Yep.
It's amazing. Not that we could even fully grasp how we were in the heart and mind of God, prior to our conception. But that's one beautiful truth, about babies who are aborted is I believe that they go straight to be in the presence of God, and those who trust in Jesus Christ will get to spend eternity, with the babies who have been aborted. Yeah. But it's important to understand that the baby is also an image bearer. The human race, we are image bearers of God. And while that's not to suggest that God looks like us, but just a little bit older, I do believe that we were created to be triune beings, body, soul, and spirit, after the likeness of our triune God. But in Genesis 1, we learn that God created mankind in his own image, and in the image of God, he created them male and female. He created them, right? And so while Adam and Eve were specially made there in the garden, God also created Adam and Eve to be able to procreate. And the baby that's formed in the womb by God is also then created in his image and according to his likeness. And so what does that say about the hands of those who shed the innocent blood of the unborn? And this reminds me of the proverb that Solomon tells us that God hates the hands of those who shed innocent blood. Yeah. And blood is formed within the baby within the first 2 weeks. You have the beginnings of the formations of blood. Yeah. And so just within a few weeks, if that baby is aborted, that's innocent blood being shed.
Yeah.
And there's a curse on the nation that sheds innocent blood.
Yep.
That should make us shudder as a nation.
Yeah. Yep. Another example I think that beautifully illustrates the personhood of the baby in the womb is Luke. This is New Testament now. Luke chapter 1, verse 41. I think we just went through this some time ago, right? But this is when Mary is pregnant with Jesus, and then her cousin, right, Elizabeth, is pregnant with what is John the Baptist. And Mary goes and visits Elizabeth, and then it says, and it happened when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary that the babe leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. But there was a recognition from John the Baptist that, my Savior's here, But just to tie it into what we understand from babies now, we know so much more about what happens in the womb in terms of the development of the fetus, where we take 4D sonograms now, real time sonograms of what a baby is doing. You notice that babies are active inside of the womb. They are sucking their thumb. They even smile. They react to the voice of their mother and their father. And they're developing that connection inside of the womb. They are a person, and they're acting like a person inside of the womb already.
And they also try to defend themselves against abortion.
That's right.
We've seen video of babies attempting to defend themselves against...
Essentially trying to back themselves in a corner and trying to get away from whatever's trying to attack them. Yep. Wow.
Because, once their nerves form, they're feeling pain. It's horrific to imagine that this is how, we treat our babies, the most innocent, the most vulnerable people on the planet. And this is how we treat so many of them. Yeah. 60 million since Roe v. Wade. It's horrific. But I do love that idea that John the Baptist leapt in his mother's womb after hearing the voice of Mary. And, one of the things that I find interesting about that is, as the pastor of this church, I'm constantly speaking through the amplification of our PA system here. And when pregnant ladies, sit here and they sit through Bible study after Bible study, and then they finally give birth, right? And I see the recognition when there's that little baby there. It's like we have a couple in the church right now that mom just gave birth to little Felicity, right? And Dad brought Felicity in and handed them to me last night. Handed her to me, and as I was talking, I could just see her just like. There's just a recognition of my voice, because that my voice has been amplified, and I think they recognize me, though they probably were hoping I was better looking. Yeah. But there's there's just that there's like there's a recognition in the eyes, when I start speaking to a newborn, and it's just amazing to see that.
Yeah, and
they're aware.
We're learning so much, and we know so much already. And there's no doubt that that baby in the womb is alive, is responding. It is a living, breathing human person in that womb. Again, that just goes back to, it boggles my mind why a corporation like Planned Parenthood would fight so hard to withhold that kind of information from the mother, to not show the sonograms, to not go that extra step and give them all the information about what is in the womb of the mother. And I can only, have a handful of explanations about why that is.
Right.
And it breaks my heart. And something needs to change.
And I think it comes back again to, I think most, I would say all ladies who have abortions are convinced that this is not life. This is just a clump of cells. It's an inconvenience in your life right now. So let's allow us to remove this inconvenience, right?
Yeah.
I think that's typically the story.
Yeah.
And we just want you to know that you're being duped, you're being sold, you're being given the Kool-Aid, and they want you to drink it, and for what reasons? Well, the Planned Parenthood is making a bunch of money, 2 ways. 3 ways, actually, when you consider the government funding as well. They're getting government funding, they're charging you for the abortion, and then they're selling baby parts. That's cashing in 3 ways. You better believe that they're going to try to convince you that this is okay, there's nothing wrong with this.
Yeah.
But I think we know in our heart of hearts that there's something wrong with this. And even in the cases of, say, like, rape and incest. Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because that's one of the arguments that a lot of Christians will concede. Well, in the case of rape, we can't expect a woman to carry a child which is the product of rape for 9 months, only to then give birth and give it up for adoption, right? Yeah. We can't expect that.
Imagine the trauma of having to have that reminder on a daily basis.
I could not imagine how difficult this would be for a woman to carry a baby of her rapist. I cannot imagine how difficult that would be, and it breaks my heart that we live in such a world that this could be a situation. Yeah. And yet, why do we punish the child for what the father did? How could we do that? How is that just? How is it just to punish a unborn baby for what the father did? If I came to you and I said, well, your dad was a criminal and he robbed this bank and he stole $1 million, but he's dead, he passed away, right? But we never found the money, so you, as the child of this dad, you have to come up with that money or you have to go to jail. Mm-hmm. We would cry out. That would be unjust. That would be unjust. That would be, it's not fair. Yeah. It wouldn't be fair to punish a son or a daughter for what the father did, right?
Yeah.
We would never lock someone up because of what the parent did. And yet that's what the abortion of a baby who is the product of rape, that's what that is. It's punishing the baby for what the father did.
Yep.
And while pray that, we could be a culture where men would recognize it's wrong to rape. It's wrong. And I could wish that every rapist would, be locked away forever. But we don't punish the children. We don't punish a child for what the father did. And yes, it's going to be tough for a woman to carry that child for 9 months. Mm-hmm. But you know what's tougher? Living the rest of your life with the guilt that is associated with murdering your baby.
Yeah.
And the emotional pain that comes along with that.
Yeah, and perhaps this is where the church can do a much better job of surrounding these women that have been raped, or now the incestuous relationships. Having the church do a better job of surrounding these women and supporting them and really loving on them.
Right. And that's a two-way street, right? Because if you don't know that this is the situation, then how do you provide that care? Mm-hmm. So it's got to be a transparency. It's got to be the woman who's gone through such a traumatic situation, going and finding trusted sisters in Christ and leaders who can come alongside and provide that care. So there's that two-way street that the church needs to be there for those ladies. Those ladies need to, come and reveal the situation so that care can be provided. And it's sad that so many people do suffer in silence in the church because they're too embarrassed to talk about what's actually happened. Yeah. And would it be to God that every church would be a place where women can come in and find trusted leaders and reveal their story and receive the care that the Lord wants to give them. Yeah, and and I'm also talking to the Christian out there who, like you said, this is one of the areas where they usually give up. They compromise, right? And taking a pro-life position, but will compromise on the rape or the incest, or these, very highly rare cases, right. Because again, it's an emotional thing. Yes. But I think we need to, when we think clearly about the situation, we can see that, like you said, we are not going to right a wrong with another wrong. That's right. With murder. And so this is a stand that I think all Christians need to take, is to understand we need to provide and protect the life of the unborn. We do not punish it for the wrong of the father. So keep that in mind if you're on that side of the fence there. Okay, we're nearing the end of where Austin Cable Access Channel 11. We're going to be we're going to stop our stream to Channel 11 here in a little bit. But I encourage you to please join us on our YouTube channel. We're live streaming from there. Go to youtube.com/Calvary South Austin. That's youtube.com/Calvary South Austin, and join us on that live stream. We're about to end our discussion here and start our Q&A session. And so hopefully we got some good questions lined up, and we're gonna finish off our discussion about abortion on that note. But yeah, we're gonna be ending our stream to Austin Cable Access Channel 11. So if you're watching on that channel, join us on the YouTube live stream. And if you're on the YouTube live stream, we're going to just take a brief little break here in a little bit, and then we'll come back on that flip side. But until I get the thumbs up about when we're ending that, I think I still have a little bit of time. I do want to mention that, how much time do I got? 20 seconds. I just want to invite you guys. We're here at Calvary South Austin. We have Sunday morning services and Wednesday evening services. Sunday mornings at 9:15 and 11:15 a.m. And then Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Come on down, join us. We're taking all the necessary safety measures. I'll catch you on the flip side. Stay on the YouTube live stream. We'll be right back. All right. Thank you for sticking with us, guys. Again, this is a deep topic. I hope we were covering a lot of ground here. We really wanted to give a comprehensive review and understanding of this highly controversial topic of abortion. Hopefully we've been doing it justice. And again, if you guys have questions, you got any feedback,
We're going to start opening our lines to the Q&A. Again, if you're on that live chat, start sending them in. They're queuing them up. If you want to email them, outreach@calvarysouthaustin.com. And if you want to call in your question, it's at 512-576-5433. So we just finished talking about, that really tough case about rape and incest, because as we mentioned, these are usually the cases that, this is usually the argument that is brought up to justify the broad access to abortion. And so we've talked about that a little bit, and how we don't want to punish the life that is in the womb because of the wrong of the father. And so I hope that makes sense. I hope that came across and that you guys understand that and see the heart behind it. Again, we can't imagine the trauma and the emotions that the mother is going through during a situation like that. I personally don't know anybody, but of course I've read of cases and people going through that. Heartbreaking. And like Bunjee said, it's really difficult to know that you live in a world that this is going on, that these are actual situations that occur. But we need to think with a clear head and really kind of try to separate emotions in understanding that this is a life still, and we need to protect that life. But then bringing the emotions back in and say, we as a church especially, we need to go and surround that mother, that woman, and give her the support that she needs, so that baby also can be brought to term and be cared for, whether it's with the mother still or whether it's through the adoption process. So keep that in mind, guys. At this moment, I think we're gonna just end our conversation there. This is an ultra long marathon of an episode, but we're here for you guys. So we're gonna enter in our Q&A time. All right, I see I got some questions pulled up here. So again, if you got questions, just start sending them in. We're gonna try to answer as many as we can within a reasonable amount of time. So thank you for sticking with us, and let's get into our first question here.
I think we'll probably get this wrapped up before the votes are counted. So
yes, anybody got any
so don't
updates
worry
on that? Yeah, nice. All right. First question, as you explain, Planned Parenthood has been exposed of selling or donating fetus or organs after abortions to certain groups and organizations. Do you think this will make it possible and easier access for satanic or cult-like rituals within the U.S., like Old Testament era? What do you think the result will end in, if so? Wow, very, very interesting twist on that. I didn't think about that. I don't think so, but and I'm shooting off the cuff here because this is a brand new kind of question that's being put to me.
So is this off the back?
This is off the back, off the cuff. Right out the, what is it? I don't know what it says. Anyways.
We're just making fun of somebody.
This is the way I see it. I think that people would be more readily disgusted by if they saw a satanic cult doing this. People would be readily up in arms to call that out if they saw it. But because they see a corporation like Planned Parenthood that is kind of like a symbolic, taking a stand for women's rights, that is going to be a much larger beast to bring down, especially since it is governmentally funded, or at least it's on its way out. But still, it is a core symbol in culture and for women all across the U.S. and especially the world, that you're going to have a harder time convincing people that what Planned Parenthood is engaging in is morally wrong than you would if you saw in the news that, a satanic cult was caught in the woods, had fetal remains in their hands or something. Like, people would be disgusted, I think, easier. But when they hear that a corporation that is protecting their rights and fighting with a lot of money and rhetoric for their supposed abortion rights, you're going to have a harder time bringing down that beast.
I would point out that the Church of Satan is...
yes, that's true. That's true.
The Church of Satan is claiming abortion access is a religious right, right?
It's clever. They're doing the clever
maneuver. We can't lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Which is not to say, I'm not making the argument that the Church of Satan is buying up, baby parts and using them in some sort of ritual. I don't have any evidence of that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And furthermore, I would point out that, Jesus describes Satan as the thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Right? And so with that, I would want to, maybe grasp how God sees an organization like Planned Parenthood and a government that uses taxpayer money to, help to support all of that. And, would God see that as satanic?
I think the spirit of Satan.
I don't know that I could come right out and just say that, this is like, satanic worshipers using baby parts to go do, cultic.
Yeah.
It's not like they're throwing it into the idol of Molech and watching it burn.
Yeah.
It's not exactly like that. But at the end of the day, what were they doing when they threw their children into the fires of Molech? But they were wanting better crops. They were wanting, a better income, so to speak, right? Yeah.
Better way of living.
They were wanting a better way of life. They were, right? Well, how many stars have we heard recently even saying that I get to be a movie star, I get to be a singer because of abortion?
Yeah.
Did they engage in some level of Satanism?
Yeah.
I can't really say that, explicitly they did, but is it not the same thing as the ancient people throwing their babies into the fires of Molech so that they could, receive the blessings of Molech?
Yeah, there's a group called Shout Your Abortion, and there was this movement a while back about basically, as Bunjee mentioned earlier, and I remember because I was a kid growing up in this time, like in the early 90s when Clinton was president, and that phrase of making abortion safe, legal, and rare. That was the idea not too long ago. But now we've entered into an era of Shout Your Abortion. We've entered into an era of we're making videos. What was her name? Netflix, the so-called comedian.
Yes, I don't recall.
She was
but
yeah. She had a show on Netflix, and maybe somebody can look it up.
I'm looking it up.
And she had a send-off on one of her shows about celebrating abortion and abortion rights. And she turned it into this kind of Independence type, Independence Day, flags and stars. And
Michelle Wolf,
that's right. Kind of red-haired, curly-haired, freckled girl. And she created this kind of music montage celebrating abortion. So we went from safe, legal, and rare to now we're celebrating abortion. Not only that, this group called Shout Your Abortion, they recently had, for reasons unknown to me that don't make sense, but they had this reggaeton singer. She's a female singer, and she created a music video celebrating abortion. I don't encourage anybody to watch it, but it is god-awful. But she is basically, there's a lot of imagery in there that is sacrilegious and basically celebrating abortion. And it's no surprise that culture, as we've heard it said, is downstream from politics. What we see happening in culture is going to affect the body politic. And now we're going to start seeing legislation, as we see in New York, where they basically made access to abortion legal for all terms of pregnancy. So sad.
Yeah, so she even concluded that show, and I remember seeing it the next day. After looking at the highlight reels, she concluded the show by saying, "God bless America and God bless abortion," and that's when I contacted Netflix.
Yes,
because Netflix spent their money on producing that show. Like, I think streaming services are going to, stream all kinds of movies that I disagree with, and I don't have a problem with that. But if I'm giving money to you and then you take that money and create a show like this where you say God bless abortion, you don't get my money anymore. And I shut Netflix off the very next day, and Yeah, that shocked me.
Yeah, you're right in bringing up that aspect of, like, for all intents and purposes, this is a form of sacrifice that is appeasing to Satan.
It's Satanism, probably unwittingly.
Unwittingly.
Right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that the average, person that supports the pro-choice position is actively worshiping Satan. But then again, think about it like this. The number one rule in the Book of the Law, which is Aleister Crowley's book on Satanism, the Book of the Law tells us that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Mm-hmm. Do what thou wilt, right? So in other words, do whatever you want to do. And that's good enough for Satan.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because what we naturally want to do is in opposition to what God wants for us, right? Our flesh is fallen. We're, in other words, we have a sinful nature, that permeates our very being, right? We're sinners who love to sin. So Satan recognizes that he doesn't need us to worship him. He just needs us to act upon our fallen nature.
Yep.
And as long as we're just doing whatever we want to do, whatever's in our heart to do, well, that's good enough for him. Yep. Because we're not going to be following God if we do whatever we want to do. So,
right.
So inadvertently, I would say that, Planned Parenthood is promoting Satanism, though I don't have any evidence to say that they're actually selling body parts to, some sort of satanic group that is using those parts for specific, satanic purposes. I don't have any evidence of that.
Yeah, good distinction. All right, let's see another question here. Oh, this is going. What is the church's stance on the Plan B pill? A pill that a woman takes to prevent a pregnancy.
Yeah.
So that's specifically talking about, I guess, about church's stance.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for our church. I mean, I'm guessing that different churches are going to have different, positions on this. Some churches are opposed to,
all types of birth control.
Birth control, and some churches are just completely opposed to birth control.
Yep.
I don't share that point of view. I think that birth control is fine. I think if I understand the Plan B pill properly, this is just another form of birth control. Mm-hmm. I don't think that it ends a pregnancy, if I understand it.
Right. So there's a difference between pill or birth control that prevents pregnancies, which the questioner pointed out, and then birth control that acts as an abortifacient.
Right.
That aborts the pregnancy.
Yes. That I would have an issue with.
Right.
Because I believe that legally, scientifically, biblically, philosophically, life begins at conception.
Yes.
So anything that would then flip that switch to off, I would have an issue with.
Yes. The unjustified killing of a human being is murder.
Yes.
And that is essentially what the abortifacient birth control does.
But something that
prevents.
Stops the conception from happening, whatever might stop the egg from being fertilized by the sperm, to stop that process, I don't personally see a problem with it.
Yeah.
I know that there's some people who use certain passages from the Bible and make an argument that's wrong, but I just think they're taking that out of context, and I don't agree with it. Right. Sure. So I'm fine with preventing pregnancy.
Yeah.
I'm not fine with terminating the life of an unborn baby.
Yeah, I mean,
regardless of what stage they're in. Yeah, the size and the development, the sled, it doesn't matter.
But I think this brings up a good point about, as Christians, I think there are a lot of Christians who are unaware of what certain birth control accomplishes, whether it is just preventing the pregnancy versus abortifacients. Right. And I think this is where Christians need to do their due diligence in researching. Obviously, if you're if you're married and you're researching, okay, well, we're going to have birth control, don't just choose any old birth control. Do your research. Yeah. As Christians, we need to be walking wisely in this world that we're in.
Yeah.
And we don't want to inadvertently be taking abortive patients, and all of a sudden we're taking the life of God knows how many kids,
Right.
unwittingly.
So again, just to say that I don't know enough about the Plan B pill, to be able to say this is exactly what it does. But with the preface that as long as it's not ending a pregnancy, I don't see a problem with it.
Gotcha. Yep, sounds good. If whoever the questioner was, if you needed more clarification on that, feel free to send in another question. We'll try to tackle that. Let's move on to another question here. How would you evangelize to someone who says, "My body, my choice"?
Yeah, I mean, we basically tackled that 5 hours ago.
Yeah.
When
or in election time. I don't know. Anything can happen.
You're trying. But again, once there is that moment of conception, once the sperm fertilizes the egg, once 23 chromosomes meet 23 chromosomes,
Yep.
And new DNA is formed, you have another body. Right.
Yep.
So, we can take this moment to address the violinist argument, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Because there would be those who would say that, well, this isn't my child; it's a parasite.
Yeah.
It's my body. I should be able to choose if I abort a parasite from my body, and that gets into what is this in your body right now, right?
Yeah, so,
because if it's a human, then there's two bodies. So my body, my choice no longer applies when you have two bodies. So the question is it two bodies or is it just one?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this also, that I would say generally it's rare that you would come across a person that would acknowledge the humanity of the unborn child and still take an extreme position like, I still my rights trump the rights of that baby in the womb. I know they're out there, and I've seen, but I think it's rare enough that you might not ever come across a person like that. But there are still people that take that extreme position. They acknowledge the humanity, and they still say my rights trump that other the baby's rights. But Bunjee brought up the violinist argument, and I honestly think that is probably one of the strongest arguments put forth for abortion. If anything, all the other ones that we're probably going to tackle tonight, like my body, my choice, if that slogan alone, I think we can easily just point to the science. But this violinist argument is a very special one, and if the viewers out there aren't familiar with it, it comes from a philosopher. Her name was Judith Jarvis Thomson, and this was back in 1971, and she brought up this what's called the violinist argument. And essentially what she did was very kind of clever on her part. She acknowledges the humanity. It's a given. I'll give you the humanity of the unborn, but that's considered now the case of what all is entailed in a pregnancy and the relationship between the mother and the unborn child. And she uses this illustration of a violinist. She says, what if one day you woke up and you were basically tied, like with like a catheter or something, like tubes running, basically connected to a violinist. It was a well-known violinist throughout, world famous, world renowned, and you are now supplying blood flow and nutrients to that violinist because they're hooked up to you, and you just woke up like that. You had no choice in the matter. You woke up, this violinist is tied to you. You have a choice. You can continue to provide support. You stay hooked up to this violinist, this world-renowned violinist, or you have a choice to disconnect, but then the violinist will die. So it grants the humanity of the other person in the argument, but then it brings up this kind of moral dilemma. What do? Do you stay tethered, or do you unplug and allow the violinist to die? And so this really, caused some commotion back when it was brought up. But over time, as people have gotten to really dig down into, okay, what is this actually trying to compare? We see that there are some
pretty big flaws. And really one big one is what you brought up is, what is the relationship between the mother and the baby?
Right.
Is it like what's being brought up here in the violinist argument between a woman and some stranger violinist?
Yeah. Yeah, so, one of the issues that I have with the argument is that the lady who wakes up tethered on life support to this famous violinist, she didn't make a choice that resulted in the procreation of that violinist. This is a complete stranger. There's other forms of life support. There's other ways to save this individual that you don't know from Adam, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a distinctly different category than a woman who made a choice to go and engage in an intimate relationship with a guy, and by that choice ended up pregnant.
Yep.
And then decides...
Which are the vast majority of cases.
Vast majority.
Yep.
Right. The very small percent, is incest and rape, which we've addressed. So dealing with the vast majority of abortions, it's typically a woman who made a choice with her body to go and engage in an intimate relationship with a man and ended up pregnant. Your body, your choice at that point.
Yeah.
Right? It was your body. You made a choice. Then you got pregnant, and that's where now you have a second body involved. You have a second body, a second life, a second individual with distinct DNA. And to suggest that this is similar to being forced to be tethered to a violinist that you've never met before, mm-hmm. that you were like asleep and had no choice in the matter, and now you've woken up, and now you're being forced to support the life of, this other individual. It's such a categorical difference. Yep. No. You weren't asleep. You were awake. You made a conscious decision to engage in this relationship with this guy. You ended up pregnant. That was your choice. That was your body. But now you've allowed within your body the creation, the procreation of another life, another body. To take that life because you don't want it, to grow within your body for 9 months.
Yeah.
That is the complete termination of another life, another body. So my body, my choice, it applies prior to pregnancy, but not after.
So yeah, that new body, that new life that is now created because of your choice, you have an obligation, not just legally, but morally. And you do not want to violate that. We talk a lot about protecting the most vulnerable. For Pete's sake, we have laws that are protecting eagle eggs and endangered species eggs and habitats.
Are they magical eagle eggs?
Magical eagle eggs. They do not work, Stephen. But yeah, we're trying to protect. We are so quick to run to save the whales, save the dolphins, save the eagle eggs. But yet we don't want to consider, all of a sudden when it comes to the life that is within the womb, we don't want to consider the obligations that are incumbent upon that life.
Which that reminds me of last summer on Corpus, just trying to get some sun on the beach, and they kept trying to push me back into the water, and I'm just like, come on, guys. Just trying to get some sun out here.
I'm a beached whale. That's good. That's good.
It's horrible.
I like it. All right. So yeah, my body, my choice. And I would, let's tackle this from a different perspective, because there is the straight up answer to the slogan. But then how do you successfully witness to somebody like that? Like, how do you come across with that information in a persuasive fashion? Mm-hmm. And that's the tough part, right? Because it's 1 Peter 3:15. It tells us to sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and then always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within you, and do it with meekness and fear. So there's a different, you can go the Westboro Baptist route, of just condemning the people. You're going to hell, the abortion, you're murdering your baby, and you can go that route, which I don't think is very much successful. But then there's this route of going, as the Bible tells us, do it with meekness and fear. Remember, you're not just tearing down an argument, you're talking to a person.
Right.
And that's the harder part about, I have this information, but how do I communicate it in such a way that will let them know my heart behind it, but then also challenge them to reconsider, the beliefs that they hold. And I'm guessing there's no one way to go about it.
Right. For me, I want to know, like, what is the attitude of this individual? Are they soft? Are they going to be difficult? Are they argumentative? Are they interested? So all of that plays into how a conversation unfolds. If somebody is, just being argumentative and difficult, then I might match their tone and provide them with some very forceful facts, to kind of shake them out of their strong stance, right? Whereas if somebody is really wondering, really wanting information, really wanting to talk about it because they're struggling, maybe they recognize that this is something that they've been told, but they're struggling, with whether that's a right decision or not, then I'm going to be much more gentle. I'm going to want to just kind of walk them through an understanding philosophically. Like when do we determine that this is a life? At what point in time? What switch gets flipped after conception that would transform this? At what point in time would you consider this a life? When it breathes, when it bleeds, and being more compassionate. In the approach. So I typically meet people where they're at. And those who are aggressive, then sometimes a soft answer turns away the wrath. So that could even be a case as well. But I think it's important to recognize that gaining the information, having a ready response, but then relying on the Holy Spirit to guide. I find that to be the most effective approach. Is not going in with a pre-written script. But just being open to the Holy Spirit so that the individual can be ministered to right where they're at. Sometimes they're a proud person that needs to be humbled. Sometimes they're a humble person that needs to be lifted up.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about being armed with information.
Right.
I think it's, as Christians, we should all be ready with specifics. Don't just talk about, well, I heard that, sometime there's a lot of abortions, and be ready with specifics. Be ready with quotes. Maybe you have them stored in a note or something, that way you can readily pull them up and offer that to that individual. And of course, they should be going back to their home and verifying this information, but be ready with specifics. I think that'll help out a lot. Very good. Let's see. This is another good one. What would you say to someone who claims that if abortion was made illegal, women would just seek dangerous alternative methods of terminations? Coat hangers in the back alleys, right? I think the way I've heard it put for so long was, we don't want to go back to the back alley abortion days where thousands of women were dying when abortion was illegal before Roe v. Wade.
Right. So imagine somebody wants to murder me. Might not be hard to imagine, but somebody's like, well, I'd like to murder Bunjee, but it's going to be difficult because it's not legal. He's probably going to defend himself, right? So if I can just overturn that law, make it legal so that he can't defend himself, then that would be much easier for me to murder Bunjee, right? And, let's say that I then turned around and I said, well, now that you've passed this law, I'm going to do everything I can to overturn that law that allows you to come and murder me without me being able to defend myself, right? So I'm going to work as hard as I can to reverse that law that allows you to come and murder me, right? And they say, well, we don't really want to go back to the days when Bunjee could defend himself. Well, what kind of sense would that make? Right? We don't want to go back to the days when, if I murdered Bunjee, that I might be charged for it, and I might become a criminal because of it, right? In similar fashion, it's like the person who's saying, well, we don't want to go back to the days when women had to go get illegal abortions. So in order to make it easy on women to kill their babies, let's keep it legal.
It's an appeal to pity.
What? So in order to, make it safe for you and accessible for you to end the life of your child, I'm expected to not fight against, the decision of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
To me, it's a pitiful argument, because again, your body, your choice. You get to choose when you go and have intimate times with men, and you get to choose whether you're going to use birth control, and you get to choose whether you end up pregnant or not.
Yeah.
And that's where your choice exists. But according to the law, when we look at when conception results in a Homo sapien, the law, that's what the law says about that. When it comes to the science, when it comes to the philosophy, when it comes to what the Bible says, and when we look at all of that, we have to come to the conclusion that conception equals new life.
Yeah.
And therefore, we should make it as difficult as possible for someone to abort their baby, so that if they do choose to go and have a back alley abortion, that's their choice. That's their choice.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't make it easy for people to have the choice to actually end the life of their child.
Yeah, that is the fundamental, that's the crux of what you need to dismantle is, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You still need to answer that question, is it a life?
That's right.
Because if it's a life, you wouldn't be asking that question.
Yep.
But if I can take it a step further,
Sure.
I honestly think this question is really based on misinformation.
Yes.
So is it truly the case that women, by the thousands, were having back alley abortions with coat hangers before Roe v. Wade?
Right.
Let's consider that. Doing some digging. And did you know that from the information that we have from the 40s through up to the time when Roe v. Wade was passed, abortion rate was actually dropping steadily, in some cases steeply. And most of it was really due to just advances in medical care and better hygiene. So abortion rate was already dropping from the 40s on, and abortion was already illegal. So it was steadily dropping. But, okay, there are still women who are seeking out illegal abortions. Were they doing it in back alleys? Were they doing it with coat hangers? Were they dying by the thousands? No. Let's hear it from a couple of quotes. In 1960, Mary Calderon, believed she was associated with Planned Parenthood at the time. She stated this in 1960, this is before Roe v. Wade passed: abortion is no longer a dangerous procedure. Only 260 deaths from abortion of any kind. And 90% of illegal abortions are currently being done by physicians. That's a low number. 260 deaths from abortions of any kind. Well, not including the abortions themselves, but let's say a botched abortion. 260. That's not the thousands number that we keep hearing. How about the co-founders of NARAL, one of them that Bunjee brought up earlier, Bernard Nathanson and Larry Lader, co-founders of NARAL, National Abortion Rights. They admitted that this number, that tens of thousands of women are dying from illegal abortions. They admitted that this number was false. Here's their quote that Bernard Nathanson mentioned: tens of thousands of people dying from back alley abortions, that was a lie propagated by the co-founders of NARAL.
It's like they took all these numbers, put it on a radio flyer wagon, and just snuck it into Pennsylvania. That's exactly what happened there.
Oh, we're going to have a couple more before the night's over, guys. That number is admittedly false, but it stayed within the cultural word, and it has been being propagated for now generations, that people are still relying on this slogan, essentially. Do you really want to go back to the back alley abortion days when thousands of women were dying? Let me tell you this. In 1972, 1 year before Roe v. Wade passed, 39 women died from illegal abortions and 24 from legal abortions. The next year, when Roe v. Wade was passed, 1973, 19 women died from illegal abortions and 25 died from legal abortions. More women died from legal abortions than illegal abortions that year. And the number is drastically low. We want to keep it at 0.
Yeah.
But this is a narrative that has been the source of misinformation for now generations.
Yeah.
So hopefully you be armed with this information and feed it to this person who's bringing up this slogan.
And then also it's based on the belief that abortion is safe.
That's right. That's true. Given what we just discussed, it is far from safe. It is not a safe procedure. And somebody brought up earlier about what's his name, Richard Gosnell, up in Pennsylvania some years back. Where they basically were tipped off that a lot of women were dying after visiting him, and what they found when they raided his office, it was the most grotesque scene. Yeah. Baby body parts in jars, as if they were just, artifacts. But then the most gross environment with which to go through with a surgical procedure. And he's in prison right now, and there's a movie made out of him. Yeah. So it's crazy.
Then there's Tiller the Killer. There's some bad dudes out there. Yeah. who what would attract you to this industry anyway?
Yeah. Money. Yep.
This leads us to this next question. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you got this one.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead. You want to read it?
Oh, sure. So to overturn abortion laws, does that have to go through the Supreme Court, or will it be by state? It's a good question, because it kind of takes us back to the beginning of our conversation, which is that, people are freaking out about ACB, because they think that she's going to come in, and if she overturns Roe v. Wade, then it basically decimates all abortion options, and it doesn't. Yep. So Roe v. Wade does need to be overturned in the Supreme Court, because that's the court that made the decision. So in order to overturn, which basically is a federal law that overrides states' rights. So the goal to overturn Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court level is to remove this federal mandate, so that each state can decide, so that Texas can go back to saying, no, we don't do abortions in Texas. That's the way it was at the time of Roe v. Wade. This was illegal here. You want to go to the next state over where it's legal, go for it.
Yep.
But as for Texas, we're going to make it illegal, right? And that's the way it was at the time of Roe v. Wade. So if it gets overturned at the Supreme Court level, then it all goes back to the decisions made by each state, which is the way it ought to be.
Yeah.
Because not all states are the same, and some people want to be led by conservative constitutionalists, and others
want to experiment.
Don't. I hope it does get overturned. I hope Roe v. Wade, and that's my prayer, that Roe v. Wade is overturned there at the Supreme Court, so that the states can then take back control over each state's decision on whether to provide abortion services or not. Yeah. I don't think that we as taxpayers should be funding this in any way, shape, or form. I'm completely opposed to that. I shouldn't be forced, and you shouldn't be forced to pay for the services that enable women to abort their babies. That's not something that we should be forced to pay for.
You know what? I've also come across this where it seems that certain groups, like Christians and conservatives, it seems that they heavily rely on legislative wins in order to kind of create this maybe kind of fake understand, or fake like a fake victory, that as long as we get the right laws in place, then abortion's going to be eradicated. Yeah. But that's not the case. No. But I think that many people are kind of heavily depending on that.
Yes.
Whereas the view I take is that it needs to be a grassroots effort. We need to change the culture from the ground up. Right. It needs to be a grassroots effort of convincing people. What's that old adage of a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still? If I just make a law, you're still going to disagree with it. you're not going to be convinced. I need to go through the hard effort of having a conversation with you, presenting evidence, and hopefully you'll change your mind based on the evidence.
Yeah.
And then we'll both go to the ballot box and vote to make good legislation.
Yeah, I didn't become pro-life until I became a Christian. I was completely pro-choice. And, I didn't give up the pro-choice position because somebody came and showed me a picture of an aborted baby and told me how horrible it is and these sorts of things. And it's not to suggest that, you shouldn't go down to Planned Parenthood and picket and these sorts of things because, God can use all kinds of measures. But I didn't become pro-life because somebody presented me with pro-life arguments. Somebody led me to Jesus. I, came to grips with the fact that I'm a huge sinner and I have to rethink my entire life. Mm-hmm. And then when I was presented with the pro-life arguments from the scriptures changed my mind, and I began to realize that the life in the womb is much different than I imagined. It's not just a clump of cells. Yep. This is a little person that God is forming in His image and according to His likeness. So, Christian, please understand, that you can go out with all the best pro-life arguments in the world, but at the end of the day, the person needs to be converted to Christ. They need to be led to Jesus, and as the Lord then begins to change their heart, inevitably they'll become pro-life. So I think that the best thing that we can do is lead people to Jesus. Yep. Preach the gospel, lead people to Jesus, call them to repent. And as they come to Jesus, Jesus will begin to fix their point of view.
Yeah, well said. So I think we got just one more objection that is usually brought up. And this is one that I think is worth it. So it says, what about the person who says, I'm personally against abortion, but I'm okay with it being legal because, I don't want to impose.
Right.
They have the right to make that decision for themselves. But I'm personally against it. How do we approach that?
Yeah, and I've heard this, from people on both sides of the aisle, mm-hmm. and it would be similar to saying, I'm personally against murder. Yeah. But I don't think we need to, have a law against murder. If somebody else wants to murder a person,
or slavery,
I'm personally against slavery.
Yeah.
But, I'm not going to impose my point of view on others. Well, we don't do that. Of course, we're going to stand against slavery. We're going to stand against murder. Well, I'm personally against, robbing,
yes.
But I'm not going to, impose that on any. No. Listen, we ought to be legislating morality, especially when it comes to the protection of the most vulnerable.
Yep.
I've seen America just sacrifice so much this year for
small group of individuals,
the elderly,
yep.
and those who are high risk.
Yeah.
I've seen Americans bend over backwards, wear diapers on our face, shelter in place, lock down, shut down businesses.
Schools. Yeah.
I've seen Americans making so many sacrifices for people this year. It's actually, in some ways been incredible to see. Mm-hmm. That so many people would give up so much, for something that we recognize could end the life of people that we care about, right? And so, you see people that are motivated, even like to levels of insanity sometimes, just to make sure that we protect the life of those who are vulnerable, right? Yeah. I would love to see America be even twice as hardcore about protecting the life of the innocent baby in the womb.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't that stand to reason? That if we're the kind of people who would go out of our way to protect the elderly and those who would die from COVID, that we would also turn around and put an end to the murder of these innocent babies?
Yeah. But I think that's where the rub is that every objection, honestly, that is brought up from a pro-choice position to argue for abortion, it has to equivocate on what is in the womb.
What is it?
every argument, including this one that we're talking about, the only way that it would work is if you assume that that is not a human life.
Yeah. If it's a clump of cells, I could care less.
I couldn't care less.
I could.
You could care less.
Oh,
Wow.
I could.
Oh, wow. That's low.
Yeah, if it's a clump of cells,
Yeah.
then it doesn't. We're wasting our time here.
Yep.
We've just wasted, many hours. If we're arguing over a lifeless clump of cells that isn't really life until it begins to breathe, well, then we just wasted everybody's time here.
Yeah.
But if there's enough evidence, if there's enough legal, scientific, philosophical, and biblical evidence to show that conception equals life, if there's enough evidence to make that argument, and there is, then we haven't wasted our time at all. We're actually taking a stand, for and doing our best to protect the lives of the most vulnerable. You always look back and, well, where were the Christians when it came to slavery? Where were the Christians? Why didn't the Christians take a stand, against Hitler? And well, there were some. In both cases, as a matter of fact, it was the Christian right that took a stand against slavery and brought it to an end. It was Christians that took a stand against Hitler. Bonhoeffer, and you can go down the list of those believers who, took a stand against the Third Reich and spoke out against, the Holocaust. And yeah, but it's typically this small group of Christians who start making us think about something like this until finally people start paying attention.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's what we've done here tonight. I believe, at the end of the day, I'm hoping Roe v. Wade gets overturned. I'm praying that, we stop murdering our little babies, who are just as innocent as can be, that right there in the womb. Which, I think that we're doing what we can to educate the public.
Yeah.
So that we can, help this next generation to see what errors we made along the way, in allowing this to get to where it is now. And thankfully, the next generation is more of a pro-life generation than any generation before.
Yeah, thankful for that.
Yep.
So, viewer, just so you know, that's the tactic. At the end of the day, any objection that's brought up, go immediately to, what is it?
What is it?
If it's a life, I'm with you. I mean, if it's not a life, I'm with you. If it's a life, we need to reconsider. We need to protect that life at all costs, right? So that's the tactic at the end of the day. And again, all this information, hopefully that's benefited you guys, and hopefully you can take that now, chew on it, go have some good conversations tomorrow, and thank you for joining us, guys. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you for joining us on this ultra long marathon of an episode, but I think it was well worth it. Gonna get some Z's now, and might go vote a couple times. Anyways,
Might as well.
Might as well. Hey, this wraps it up. This is another episode of Studio 118. Again, just letting you know, we're here at Calvary South Austin. We have Sunday morning services at 9:15 and 11:15 a.m. and then Wednesday evening services at 7 p.m. If you have any questions about what we do here, go ahead and call us, 512-576-5433, or you can email us at info@calvarysouthaustin.com. We'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you for joining us. We will catch you next month. Later.
You